Order. Order, please. Subcommittee on Supply will come to order. It is now 11:35 a.m. The subcommittee is meeting to consider the estimates for the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture as outlined in Resolution E11. Resolving that a sum of not exceeding $15,095,000 be granted to the Lieutenant Governor to defray expenses in respect of the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture pursuant to the estimate. I will now invite the Minister, Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture, to make opening comments for up to an hour, and if they wish to introduce their staff and committee, and realizing that your staff is delayed, we'll let you do the introductions after you speak. Is that proper? Is that okay with you?
I'll name them here.
Okay. All right. I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everyone for being here today. I cannot tell you how happy I am to be sitting here in this role and have the ability to be a member of government and a member of cabinet and have this as my portfolio for the second time. I'm just thrilled. I tell everyone all the time that I have the best job in government without question. So before I get into my speech, I would like to introduce at least one member of my team who's here now, and others will be joining as they walk down from the department. To my right, my friend, my colleague, the amazing Deputy Minister, Jason Hollett. And the others who will be joining, we will have Jordy McLaughlin, who's the Executive Director of Fisheries. We'll have Bruce Hancock, the Executive Director of Aquaculture, Carla Buchan, who's the Director of Aquaculture. We will have Leslie O'Brien-Latham. She is the Executive Director of Policy. We will have Kimberly Ann Forsyth, the Director of Business Development and Marketing. Mr. Brennan Gorham, who's the Director of Crown Lending Agencies, looking after the Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board. We will have Ms. Jasmine Pollitt, and forgive me, I've not met Ms. Jasmine. She's our financial services representative. Typically, we would have Mike O'Brien, but he is in the main chamber with the Minister of Natural Resources supporting him today. I'm certainly very, very thankful for the team that we have at Fisheries and Aquaculture and all the great work that they do to support the industry and to support me in executing my job. It's fair to say that everyone throughout Nova Scotia has a connection to the fisheries, whether it's a job, pastime, a friend, a family member, or multiple family members in the cases of some. And knowing the deep connection that Nova Scotians have to this industry, I'm extremely, extremely proud to talk about the work the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture does to support it. And I'm not alone. We do have a great team, as I referenced, the senior leadership, but we have 75 other team members all around the province working through Cape Breton, throughout the beautiful Eastern Shore, the Northumberland Strait, and down the Acadian Shore and South Shores. And I will say, from the time that I joined the team, it was made known to me that we have some of the highest engagement scores across government. So what that means is the people that are on our team are pretty happy to be on our team. And I believe that once Deputy Hollett joined the team, the engagement scores went up even higher. The fisheries and aquaculture sectors bring tremendous value to the province. And spoiler alert, you're going to hear me talk about that quite a bit over the next 40 minutes or so. We feed Nova Scotians, support local food security, and the sector drives our economy with billions of dollars in exports. The fisheries are a distinct part of Nova Scotians' history, culture, and heritage. This industry has weathered many, many challenges: extreme weather, climate change, illegal fishing, and now the threat of U.S. tariffs. Let me be very clear. Our government does not want tariffs. If the U.S. decides to apply tariffs on Canadian seafood products, Nova Scotia is prepared to respond with a Team Canada approach. Our government is committed to supporting this valuable industry, and we are ready to act now. On January 25th, the Premier wrote a letter to all Nova Scotians committing our government to support Nova Scotia's traditional natural resources, to work with these industries to help them become more self-reliant and more sustainable. We've also tabled a bill that will break down interprovincial trade barriers. We've also earmarked $200 million as contingency in this budget. Should tariffs become a reality for us, there's money earmarked to support industry. We need to unlock Nova Scotia's potential and further develop our resources like our fisheries and seafood sector. We know that developing these resources will create jobs. It will strengthen our economy and build a stronger, more resilient Nova Scotia. At the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, we are already making this happen. And in fact, some may have already heard me share that seafood is our province's #1 export. And Nova Scotia seafood exports totaled almost $2.5 billion last year. Billion. And that's money that's coming directly into the province. And this money is helping to move our province forward by increasing housing, helping families, and growing the economy. These investments are all connected. They all support growth. Fisheries and aquaculture are key to this work. The people in our sector produce food, create jobs, and run businesses that fuel a healthy economy and vibrant communities. And today, I'm pleased to update you on our department's progress and share information on programs designed to support these outcomes. And let's look at exports. We're expanding our work on export development, growing opportunities for both the fisheries and aquaculture sectors. The United States is currently our biggest export market, representing half of total seafood exports. And with the impending threat of tariffs, we need to mitigate the risk of our seafood sector and look for opportunities in new and emerging markets. In addition to seafood being Nova Scotia's #1 export, Nova Scotia is also the #1 seafood exporter in all of Canada. Our seafood represents close to 1/3 of the country's total seafood export value. Let's look at market diversification. To lessen the risk of primarily exporting to the U.S., we are investing an additional $200,000 to increase and expand access to international markets for our seafood industry. That's new money, this budget, and ongoing to support market diversification. And this money will help expand the department's capacity to showcase our seafood companies and their premium quality products, help open up new international markets, and facilitate business connections. I recently led an Atlantic Seafood Group trade mission to Europe, attending meetings in Italy, France, and the UK. And along with meeting new potential buyers, I met with Canadian senior trade officials, local government representatives, and trade associations to build new trade relations and gain local insight. The delegation included 6 Nova Scotian seafood companies, all of which indicated the trip was positive and will help them develop new export opportunities. In fact, I heard from one company while we were on the trip that they had closed a sale, and that is unheard of on a trade mission. Typically, these trade missions are introductory meetings, getting to know each other, learning about the products, learning about price, and months later, a sale would develop. To have one closed on the mission was remarkable. In addition to the new European markets, we're also continuing to work in the Indo-Pacific region to diversify and grow our markets. And not just for our traditional wild-caught seafood, we're also seeking opportunities to expand our aquaculture exports as well. And aquaculture is a significant contributor to our rural economy, creating jobs and representing a sustainable way to meet a growing demand for seafood worldwide. Attracting and keeping workers is a challenge in every sector, and we are helping seafood employers create modern workplaces that incentivize and reward hardworking Nova Scotians who choose to work in the sector. And there are almost 20,000 Nova Scotians who work in the fisheries and aquaculture sectors, and we want to protect their jobs. More good-paying jobs in Nova Scotia will make our economy stronger so that we can build more hospitals, more schools, and maintain more roads. People all over our province in many different careers are working hard to drive forward in this sector, which we all benefit from. And although everyone is working hard, labor is an ongoing challenge for our industry and others. Partnering with groups like the Nova Scotia Fisheries Sector Council, we're supporting industry on a number of initiatives to help address the labor shortage. One way that we're helping is through the Student Bursary Program. We are promoting our sector with students, showing them what the industry has to offer through a student bursary program that connects them with seafood employers. The program provides $750 and $1,500 bursaries toward educational fees for students. We partner with the Nova Scotia Fisheries Sector Council to manage the bursaries, and they're doing amazing work. Since the program launched, nearly 400 bursaries have been awarded to students in Nova Scotia, and last year was our most successful year, with 199 bursaries worth almost $230,000 given out. These bursaries help to address the labor gap and help students build positive, lasting connections to the seafood sector. It exposes them to options, gives them hands-on experience, encouraging them to consider a career in the industry. And to engage even more in the next generation, we launched for the first time ever in this province a marine education program, and it's designed to teach public school students about the oceans and the importance of fisheries, the fisheries sector, to our province. We're extremely proud of it. We send free learning resources to teachers at elementary schools throughout the province. The program launched last year, but we've already been hearing great things, and it's encouraging to know that our industry will be in good hands with future generations. We are preparing to extend this program into the high school grades in 2025. We are looking to the future of our sector, not only through the educational initiatives that I just referenced, but also how we can best support to continue to grow and thrive. And another way we're doing that is through this budget. Government is investing $150,000 of new money to develop a seafood sector strategy to help us plan for the future. The development of a seafood strategy will inform how we support our fisheries and aquaculture industries, how we maximize the value of our seafood resources by becoming more productive and innovative to operate and thrive in the modern global seafood environment. This strategy is an incredibly important step to map out the opportunities for our sector to grow, transform, market, innovate, and modernize for the future. We will use it as an opportunity to talk directly to those in the industry and hear from them what we need to do to address our current challenges and grow this sector to its full potential. I'm really looking forward to these conversations in the coming months. The most important issue facing this industry right now is that of illegal fishing activities. When considering the opportunities of this province's resources, there is tremendous potential in seafood, and we continue to work hard to support that potential and improve conditions for success. To support that success, this province is doing everything within our jurisdiction to protect our most valuable resource from illegal activity. Illegal fishing cheats the hard-working people in the sector. It puts our reputation as a source of safe and quality seafood at risk, and it reduces the taxable income that the province realizes. Income we need to use to build affordable housing, to build schools, roads, and healthcare facilities. Reports of increasing, unauthorized, out-of-season fishing activities in Nova Scotia's waters are a serious concern, causing tension and violence, particularly in southwest Nova Scotia and in the region of Clare. We also know it's becoming an issue province-wide. We're hearing reports of more and more communities that are facing illegal, unauthorized harvesting. The federal government estimates that up to 30% of lobsters caught in Atlantic Canada are caught illegally, representing as much as $400 million in unrealized taxable income to the province. My department is committed to action. We have a strong track record of advocating the federal government to take this issue as seriously as we are. And to that point, we're investing $325,000 to strengthen our support for the enforcement of illegal fisheries activities through new funding provided in Budget 25-26. On top of all the other efforts we've put forward, this new funding is essential to track fish buyers and fish processors and the record keeping that they maintain. And it will help identify illegal activity. We have also updated the terms and conditions of our industry licenses to better identify illegal activity and supporting industry as they adopt traceability measures. Through these actions, we will have access to more and better information and analyze buyer and processor data to identify where people are selling illegally. We can then provide this information to our enforcement partners. We have significantly increased enforcement activities in the impacted areas and supported the RCMP with the allocation of additional resources to southwest Nova Scotia. And to ensure this enforcement is punitive, we've increased our maximum fines from $100,000 to $1 million. And we continue to work with our Department of Natural Resources conservation officers to increase inspections at local seafood facilities. We are pleased to report that our colleagues there have created 3 brand new fisheries-specific conservation officer positions. These new boots-on-the-ground positions will complement our department's work to identify and punish those profiting from illegal activity. It's important to distinguish enforcement roles and responsibilities. While our colleagues at Natural Resources enforce our seafood buyers and processors, any harvesting or fishing done in our waters is a federal responsibility through the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Canada. I tell you this because I do not believe that DFO is living up to their responsibilities. We need DFO to step up their enforcement of illegal fishing where it starts, on the water. To date, they have been unwilling to do so. Our provincial buyers regulations require the purchase of legally harvested fish coming from a licensed, authorized commercial fishery, and it is the responsibility of the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans to determine, authorize, and license all commercial fisheries. This includes enforcement on the water and the wharves to make sure any seafood landed is done so legally. The DFO minister's ongoing inaction on enforcement continues to have real impacts on public safety, people's livelihoods, and the sustainability of our most valuable resource. We continue to call on DFO to increase their on-the-water enforcement activities and preserve the sustainability of this resource and halt all illegal harvesting activities. I've been very clear over the past year that the federal government is not doing enough to address this illegal activity, and this serious lack of enforcement has resulted in a significant increase in illegal fishing in St. Mary's Bay and other areas around the province. Their lack of meaningful action is not acceptable. I have repeatedly written to the DFO minister and demanded action, and in October, I flew to Ottawa to deliver that message in person. We will not stop advocating on behalf of our most valuable industry and calling on DFO to increase enforcement on the water. We need to protect the sustainability of this resource. I simply cannot stress that enough. Another example of mismanagement is DFO's most recent decisions around the management and enforcement of the Elver fishery. They enacted a significant redistribution of the Elver quota, which has led to uncertainty, financial turmoil, and has destabilized a fishery that is worth almost $50 million to Nova Scotia's economy. To maintain both the quality of the Elver product and an orderly development of the sector, we have responded to this unprecedented DFO quota reallocation by offering temporary buyer's license to Elver quota holders who do not already have one. The return to orderly and successful Elver seasons relies on increased DFO enforcement on the rivers, and I will continue to call on DFO to resource these efforts accordingly. DFO has to reform their entire approach to managing and supporting Nova Scotia's fisheries, which are our most valuable natural resource and largest export product. But despite DFO's inactions, Nova Scotia remains the #1 seafood exporter in the country, and our seafood exports generated nearly $2.5 billion in revenue. That's a clear metric that demonstrates this sector's economic benefit. I am excited about the work we are doing to diversify our markets, to position our sector for the future by developing a seafood strategy, and to crack down on illegal fishing activity. And now I'll share with you some of the exciting things we're doing to enhance opportunities within the aquaculture industry. So I've spoken a lot about how we're growing the value of a seafood industry through expanding and diversifying the seafood markets that we target. And another important way that we can increase its value is by increasing the supply. One obvious way we can do that without putting more pressure on wild stocks is through the expansion of aquaculture. And this is not surprising. The increasing demand for seafood for the last 30+ years has come from the growth of aquaculture. In fact, there is now more farmed seafood consumed in the world than wild-captured seafood. And Nova Scotia is well positioned to participate in that growth with our 13,000 kilometers of coastline, clean waters, and existing seafood infrastructure. Aquaculture is already an important part of our rural communities, employing nearly 800 people and generating about $120 million every year for Nova Scotia's economy. But we know it can do a lot more. I would like to talk about some of the initiatives that we are taking to grow the sector responsibly and sustainably. Firstly, an aquaculture pilot project in the municipality of the District of Argyll will save industry time with pre-assessed sites for growing shellfish and marine plants. We've created the Argyll Aquaculture Development Area, or ADA, the first of its kind in Canada. We worked with the municipality to designate an area for the development of shellfish and aquatic plant aquaculture. In April 15th actually, 53 sites were designated as part of the Argyll Aquaculture Development Area. I remember it was April 15th, because I think I might be the only person in the province who drove from Porters Lake to Argyle to Moser River back to Porters Lake in one day. 700 and some kilometers. It was a great day. The project supports environmentally sustainable aquaculture. It's a proactive approach to the aquaculture development to support local economies and sustainable shellfish and marine plant farming. The project is being developed in phases. The first call for 6 proposals identified sites was completed in April. The initial decisions on that call for proposals were issued on January 22nd, 2025, with the final decisions on applications anticipated by the summer of 2025. The aquaculture development area is one of multiple tools we have to support growth in the aquaculture sector. Another way we're doing it is through the Shellfish Site Reallocation Project. We make sites previously approved and currently unused sites are brought back to market. That is the explanation of shellfish site reallocation. Through public calls for proposals, the department has made 14 aquaculture sites available for reallocation. And the third thing we're doing, a third of 4, we have amended legislation to the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act to improve licensing processes for low-impact, sustainable aquaculture in response to extensive consultation with industry and other stakeholders. A key change we made was to update the decision maker for shellfish and aquatic plant aquaculture from the Nova Scotia Aquaculture Review Board to the department administrator to right-size our process and cut unnecessary red tape. We are preparing to bring new regulations into place later this year to support these Act changes. The new regulations will support the development of the aquaculture sector by reducing red tape while maintaining transparency and public input in the process. Finally, the coastal classification system. The Aquaculture Coastal Classification System is another tool in our toolbox to help the growth of the aquaculture sector. The CCS will map out all of Nova Scotia's coastline to highlight the areas that may be suitable for different types of aquaculture development. Screening will be completed for salmon, trout, mussels, and oysters. The department is preparing to launch this system in the spring. These are key actions we are taking to enable the sustainable growth of our aquaculture sector to support Nova Scotia's economy and labor force. Let's turn our attention to our valued partners. Throughout my remarks, I've talked about the different partners we work with, but there are 2 teams who do great work for our sector that I haven't mentioned yet. They are Crown Corporation Perennia and the Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board. Under Perennia falls CMAR, the Center for Marine Applied Research. CMAR leads and supports research projects in collaboration with industry, government, community, and other marine user groups that support the sustainable development of coastal resources in Nova Scotia. CMAR partners with the department to deliver on the Aquaculture Coastal Classification System project. The work done by the researchers and scientists at CMAR ensures that we have access to data and information to make science-based decisions to support innovation, which is necessary to advance the long-term sustainable development of the fisheries and aquaculture industries. Most recently, they published a study on the vulnerability of the lobster fishery to climate change. The big picture results showed that the provincial lobster fishery is not at high risk. But that does not mean there's no risk to the sector, and reports like these help us to understand the big picture and take steps to continue supporting the sector. We also partner with Perennia to fund the Seafood Accelerator Program that helps companies who want to grow, diversify, and adapt to ever-changing global market demands with projects focused on product development, food safety, and process improvements. Another team who supports this sector every single day is the team at the Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board. They get it. They care about this industry, and they have our sector's best interest at heart at every table and every conversation. The Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board has played a key role in developing our fisheries sector since 1936. Mr. Chair, you may remember when it was incorporated. The current Board of Directors has members with strong backgrounds in the fisheries and aquaculture sectors. Directors like Neil LeBlanc, a man with a distinguished career as an MLA, cabinet minister, seafood entrepreneur, and consul general to Boston, who chairs the board currently. Directors like Dr. Stephanie Colombo, the leading researcher on fish nutrition and an aquaculture expert. Directors like Leah Lewis McRae, a leader in marine research and a designated environmental professional. When the Loan Board makes decisions, they are decisions that are made entirely by Nova Scotians for Nova Scotians. Loan repayments go right back into financing other businesses within the province's seafood sector, and this is truly an example of Nova Scotia Loyal. For those not familiar with the board, they have financing options available to harvesters, processors, boat builders, marine and land-based aquaculture operators. They can also help with vessels, with licenses, equipment, land, buildings, and succession planning. They also know the unique challenges of those who are new to this industry, and that's why they have deferred financing offered to those who are starting something new, recognizing it takes time to generate revenue. They are a trusted lender and good partner. They have low arrears, under 1%, and shows how hard they work with clients from the very beginning of their loan to set them up for success. A recent economic impact study showed that in 2022-2023, the Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board's loan portfolio supported 2,845 full-time equivalent employees, $439.4 million in total provincial GDP, and $62.4 million in provincial tax revenue. These are real jobs, real investments, real economic activity occurring in every county across the province. The board has approved more than $50 million in new lending so far this year, showing their continued value as a local lender. The board is not focused on near-term success or immediate return on investment. They understand that the industry is cyclical, and they take a long-term view to their financing. So far this year, 46% of the approved applications have been to individuals or businesses led by people 19 to 35. This is an increase from 34% last year, so 12% more. The increase of young people entering the industry is impressive. An increase of young people seeing a future in their province and wanting to be a part of continuing the amazing seafood success story we have. They are staying home to work in Nova Scotia, employing local people in rural communities, and helping to build rural economies. I'd like to share a few examples of how the Loan Board funding is helping Nova Scotians connect to opportunities in this sector. Financing from the Loan Board allowed Matthew Brown of Pictou County to change careers from telecommunications to become a fisherman, much like his father and grandfather before him. Matt is proud of how his business contributes to the economy. He said that the 9 boats at this wharf bring a lot of lobster to shore, and those are jobs and dollars. Jobs on the boat, jobs building traps, jobs building boats, jobs at the fish plant. There's a definite economic impact to this. And Sabrina Carpenter of Inverness County is one of several female fishers supported by the Loan Board. A trained nurse, she came to the Loan Board for their interest rates and their loan flexibility. Sabrina fished for several years prior to taking on her own enterprise and continues to nurse outside of the fishing season. Waigaba First Nation is also a valued client of the Loan Board. Financing for new and larger vessels means increased income with all earnings going back directly to the community. The work of the Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board directly supports our government's efforts to grow our resource sector and unlock our potential. Let's take a moment to look at the overall economy. As a province, we're committed to driving a strong economy now and for future generations. For the province to succeed, for Nova Scotia sea farmers, fish harvesters, processors, and buyers, and their families to succeed, we must use the bounty of natural resources we have here in Nova Scotia to help shape our future on our terms, so that our people get the jobs and the economic benefits. The fisheries and aquaculture sector brings tremendous value to our province. They support local food security and drive a successful economy with billions of dollars of income. And if that's not clear by now, you're not paying attention. As we look to the future, there's untapped potential to drive more economic value in the seafood sector, especially in aquaculture. I've shared with you the new funding my department received to develop a seafood sector strategy, to plan now and for the future, to grow, transform, innovate, and modernize the fisheries and aquaculture sector in Nova Scotia. The Atlantic Fisheries Fund is a key tool that we have to support innovation and growth in the sector as well. The Atlantic Fisheries Fund, often called the AFF, is a cost-shared partnership with the federal government and all 4 Atlantic provinces. The $420 million fund was first announced in 2017 to support growth through innovation in the fish and seafood sector in Atlantic Canada. Nova Scotia's total investment over 7 years is $38 million. Through the AFF, strategic investments in new technologies, automation, and science have assisted the seafood industry to increase efficiencies, help address labor constraints, access new markets, and maximize the economic benefits of the industry. Partnerships with a number of industry associations have allowed the fund to reach all regions and sectors of the industry. To date, 361 Nova Scotia projects have been approved, and that represents $123 million in fund commitments from the $209 million worth of investments to Nova Scotian industries. Projects have been approved for the harvesting and processing sectors of the wild and commercial fisheries, as well as in the aquaculture sector. Sadly, the federal government has not renewed AFF, and we continue to call on them to do so. It is set to expire in March of 2026. My department, along with our colleagues from the other Atlantic provinces, continue to call on them to renew it. We can all need to call on them to renew it so that we can collectively benefit from this cost-sharing investment. When it comes to supporting the growth and development of our sector, our government is committed to action. Action to support innovation and adaptation, and action to explore market diversification, action to help address climate change impacts. We are helping Nova Scotian fisheries and aquaculture sectors to become more successful and resilient. Resilient to the impacts of climate change. Our waters are becoming warmer and extreme weather events are more severe. Our seafood sector is particularly vulnerable. And now is a great time to talk about the climate plan commitments. We're working with the fisheries and aquaculture sectors to help reduce their energy and operational cost and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And this requires a new way of thinking. How can we do things more efficiently and environmentally responsibly? It requires creativity and innovation. To support our fisheries and aquaculture sector in reducing GHG emissions and reducing their operational costs, my department launched the Fisheries and Aquaculture Energy Efficiency Innovation Fund. This is a $6.5 million, 3-year program. We launched the fund on a sunny day in June at a wharf in Eastern Passage, the second best constituency with Eastern in its name. We were there with Glass Ocean's electric prototype hybrid fishing vessel called the Sea Cucumber, and it was on site to demonstrate the potential of electric and hybrid vessels for the entire sector. The Minister of Seniors and Long-Term Care and I were very fortunate to have a little tour around Eastern Passage Harbor with the Sea Cucumber. The fund supports projects that adapt emerging electric and hybrid technology for fishing vessels and fleets. It helps to install renewable energy systems, helps to reduce emissions through equipment upgrades and new technology. It helps to conduct research to enable future emission reduction projects. From the first call for proposals, 14 organizations across the province are receiving funding to help reduce their carbon footprint. Companies like the Member to First Fisheries Incorporated that received $250,000 towards the first zero-emission electric lobster fishing boat in Canada. And Ignite Atlantic received $150,000 to develop marine electrification roadmap. Working with the sector in Digby and in Sheet Harbour, shout out to my hometown, Ignite Atlantic is analyzing the grid and making recommendations that will shape a roadmap to electrify the marine sector in these areas. This program is a notable example of how we work closely with industry to address and adapt to climate change and build sustainability and self-reliance for the industry. I'm proud to announce that we are just about to call for round 2 of this program. It's another chance for more Nova Scotian companies to work with our government to help keep our province energy efficient and reduce our overall carbon footprint. Our industries are already leaders in fighting climate change. With this fund, they'll be able to do even more to build a sustainable future and grow while helping Nova Scotia get to net zero. I see a lot of potential in helping our sector use more energy-efficient technology, not only to reduce their GHGs, but also to reduce their operational costs in these uncertain times. In addition to delivering this new fund, over the last year, my department launched a climate change portal, a website that's tailored to our fisheries and aquaculture sectors. This website provides information about the impacts of climate change specific to aquaculture. It includes data about shore-based fish processors and buyers, commercial fishing, and sport fishing sectors. These are two commitments we are delivering on under the Climate Change Plan. But there's more. We're not only looking at ways to green our sector, we are looking at ways to green our own operations to make sure they are resilient to the impacts of climate change. We have 3 provincial fish hatcheries, one in Inverness County, one in Antigonish County, and one in Queens County. They stock over 1 million brook trout annually in Nova Scotia's lakes and streams and over 300,000 Atlantic salmon in select rivers. The teams at these facilities are feeling the impacts of changing water conditions that can impact operations, production, and fish health, and they're working hard to adapt. Our department has started work on infrastructure and energy efficiency upgrades at all of our hatcheries and water reuse and monitoring systems at Fraser Mills. These upgrades will make our hatcheries more efficient and more resilient to the impacts of climate change. And this is good work that has a real impact. Our 3 provincially owned hatcheries are essential to a thriving sport fishery in our province. Speaking of sport fishing, I'd like to talk more about the department's mandate when it comes to sport fishing in our province. This is a beloved pastime with a long tradition in Nova Scotia. Issuing recreational fishing licenses and supporting the growth of Nova Scotia's sport fishery is under our department's purview, and we're happy to have it. Sport fishing continues to be one of our most popular outdoor activities and generates significant income. The sector contributes more than $70 million to the provincial economy annually. Each year, more than 65,000 sport fishing licenses are sold for freshwater species like brook trout, which is, fun fact, our provincial fish. To support this sector, we have the Growing in Sport Fishing Industry in Nova Scotia strategy, which focuses on attracting more anglers to the province. This is a goal we share with our partners in Tourism Nova Scotia. Over the past 5 years, our investments in the sector have increased the number of non-residents participating in local sport fishing by about 40% for general licenses and 36% for Atlantic salmon licenses. And that's a good thing because visiting anglers spend on average twice as much money on sport fishing related activities than local anglers do. We are continuing to work with our partners in tourism to promote sport fishing. In particular, we're looking at a targeted digital marketing advertising in Ontario, the Eastern United States, and abroad to further promote our Fish Nova Scotia brand. Another priority for our department is ensuring that youth, seniors, disabled anglers, long-term care or rehabilitation facilities have the opportunities to experience sport fishing. We are continuing our work to make sport fishing in our rivers and lakes a more accessible sport to all Nova Scotians. Apologies for bumbling that sentence. Our beautiful province has many more world-class sport fishing opportunities, and increasing access to everyone continues to be a priority of our department. To that end, we've allocated $50,000 to support these organizations to increase accessible access to our lakes and rivers for the enjoyment of all. There is a significant amount of work that goes into supporting and further developing our sport fishing industry, including programs to reach more young people. Learn to Fish is a program that creates opportunities for young people to experience sport fishing, some for the very, very first time. The program includes hands-on sessions that teach the basics of fishing, species identification, and safety and conservation to support and encourage our next generation of anglers. The program has reached more than 20,000 youth across the province. The reach is impressive, and I have to thank the contributions of many in the community in sport fishing and the organizations throughout the province who have championed this program. To ensure continued access to healthy lakes and rivers for all these great sport fishing opportunities, there's a delicate balancing act that has to take place to maintain healthy ecosystems. Protecting our freshwater fish and marine resources is something that's incredibly important to the department. Over the years, we've seen the introduction of a number of aquatic invasive species in our waters, and it's incredibly concerning. And that's why we're working on an Atlantic Invasive Species Action Plan to guide priorities and assess the impacts. Invasive fish, in particular smallmouth bass and chain pickerel, threaten our native fish like trout and salmon populations. They destroy habitats, overall biodiversity, and the natural environment. And when it comes to invasive species, it's not always cut and dry. For example, smallmouth bass have been in Nova Scotia since the early 1940s. They now play an important role in the sport fishery in southwestern Nova Scotia. But there are areas where they can still disrupt the native species. This happened in 2020 and again in 2022 when they were found in Piper Lake, Pictou County, and Dobson Lake, Guysborough County, respectively. Luckily, staff acted quickly to eradicate them. I'm pleased to share that follow-up monitoring in both cases has confirmed that no smallmouth bass are being found in these lakes, and they are recovering quickly. Native species are reestablishing, and for the first time, brook trout were detected. This is a huge success story, and work like this doesn't go unnoticed. In fact, our leadership on aquatic invasive species issues is well recognized nationally and internationally. Unfortunately, we cannot rest on our successes. The risk of invasive species persists, as was evident by the identification of chained pickerel in Pictou County's Hunter Lake watershed in 2024. As a result of that discovery, a pilot mandatory retention catch and keep program was introduced for chained pickerel in that watershed in 2024. At the request of local angling organizations, similar pilots were also introduced for smallmouth bass in the Margaree River on the west branch of the Lahave. To support healthy ecosystems for our native fish populations going forward, beginning April 1st, we are implementing a province-wide mandatory catch and keep policy for chained pickerel and a similar catch and keep policy for smallmouth bass for the areas of the province east of Highway 102. This will be news for some, but is it a necessary decision to protect our native species and our environment? Now, I've mentioned sustainability across the fisheries and aquaculture sectors, and sport fishing is no different. We continue to work alongside many community groups on salmon conservation and habitat restoration. The Nova Scotia Sport Habitat Fund was created in 2005 to provide funding for habitat restoration projects throughout Nova Scotia. It supports about 20 organizations under the Nova Scotia Salmon Association Adopt a Stream program. Money is raised in part through a $5.91 levy on most fishing licenses. To date, anglers have contributed more than $5.4 million towards this program. But also, importantly, the work of the Habitat Fund Group has restored more than 2.6 million square meters of trout and salmon habitat. That's 2.6 square kilometers, which is substantial. And huge praise to Mike Bardsley and the dedicated team at the Nova Scotia Salmon Association for their continued good work. Now, a few words on food security. Our government is focused on key issues impacting Nova Scotians: healthcare, affordability, and food security, of course. Like climate change, food security is an issue around the world as well as it is here at home. As a government, our goal is for Nova Scotians to enjoy more of our great local food. We need strong fisheries and aquaculture industries and a commitment to buying local to help us achieve this. I am proud of the role seafood has in encouraging and supporting local food consumption. I encourage you all to have seafood for supper tonight. Aquaculture and our traditional fisheries address crucial social and economic issues, from food security, employment, and value-added food production to maintaining essential services in rural and coastal communities. We need to produce enough food as a province to feed our families and communities in case of emergency. Growing our own food and reducing the amount of food we import makes us more self-sufficient, more self-reliant as citizens and as a province. Our changing climate also means we need to adapt to make sure we have food security into the future. We are in a good position to meet these needs as Nova Scotia produces about 4 times more seafood than we consume. And we will continue our work to encourage more buy local and support the sector in putting affordable, healthy local food on Nova Scotians' tables. Now, more than ever, we need to be Nova Scotian loyal. Our fisheries and aquaculture businesses are what drive our economy. Now is the time to stand behind them and support them. Our government is making it easier than ever to find local products through the Nova Scotia Loyal program. Fisheries and aquacultures provide local, healthy protein for Nova Scotians. And when considering the possibility for our future province's resources, there is tremendous potential in seafood. We continue to work hard to support that potential and improve the conditions for success. I'm nearing the end of my remarks, and I certainly don't want to be shellfish with the time. No? Our government has committed to supporting our traditional natural resources. We recognize there is tremendous potential in our natural resources, and we are investing in our seafood sector. We're investing in market diversification. We're investing in the development of a seafood sector strategy. We are investing to strengthen our enforcement of illegal fishing activities, activities which cheat the hardworking people in these industries. Our department has one of the smallest budgets in government. We make the biggest impact economically. The success of our sector generates economic returns for our rural and coastal communities, money that helps build our economy, particularly in rural Nova Scotia. With a stronger economy, we can build more hospitals, schools, roads, faster. Our seafood sector has a critical role to play. It's a sector we've relied on for centuries, and is a sector that we continue to rely on now and for the future. Mr. Chair, I have concluded my remarks. I'm looking forward to the question and answer session.
Thank you, Minister. Just before we move on, I'm going to call, let's call it a 2-minute recess, just for people to have an opportunity to get a coffee outside the door there, and we'll move on. Okay?
Thank you. Oh, sure.
Order. Excuse me. According to the practice that has developed in this legislature, the opposition caucuses take turns asking questions for approximately 1 hour each. During a caucus's turn, the members within a caucus may take turns examining the minister on the estimate resolutions. Only the minister may answer questions. Caucuses are also expected to share time fairly with the independent member. To begin the examination, I now recognize the official opposition, and I recognize the member from Halifax-Shabukto.
That's me.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you,
sorry.
Chair.
I
That's okay.
recognize the honourable member from Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to thank the Minister for his remarks and recognize the team that's here. It's a lot of work. I completely recognize that. I also want to thank the Minister for the great shellfish pun that he threw in just for the halibut. I appreciate a great pun. I'm going to start with tariffs because I think it's on everyone's minds, the on-again, off-again drama of it all. And the minister and I discussed it briefly before today. So I am curious if the department is working with Senator Collins, Senator King, and Governor Mills of Maine around the lobster industry, because I know that our two industries are very closely tied.
I recognize the Honourable Minister for Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank the member for the question. So I'll start by saying that the answer is no, we're not working directly with those senators, but of course that doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. As I answered in question period today, there's a long list of actions that government is taking with the threat of tariffs unknown even to this day whether it's going to come into play. I'll also share that the Department of Intergovernmental Affairs is leading the charge provincially. We are taking the Team Canada approach, as I'm sure you've heard and seen. The Premier obviously has been in charge of this for the province and made several trips to Washington to advocate on behalf of our province and advocate on behalf of our harvesters, our valued buyers and processors. And I'll say again, repeat some of the things that I said in question period today, that you know that the trade missions that we take are an important part in looking at different markets. Historically, the trade missions are put together by the Atlantic Canadian Seafood Group, and that's a group of the 4 provinces and their various departments that work together. And I believe they have some strong conversations on where they would like to target in that particular year. Historically, it's been the Asian markets, so was fortunate in 2024 to lead a trade mission to South Korea, the Philippines. We had to come home to go and attend the House, but the trade mission continued with the companies visiting Hong Kong and I believe Singapore as well. And I know for a fact that trade mission in particular was incredibly successful. One of the companies, 2 of the companies have just told me that they've closed deals based on those trade missions from last year. So again, we have an example for this recent trade mission in Europe where sale was made on the spot. And we have an example of a trade mission from February in 2024 where conversations started. And then almost a year later, the sale was made. So we don't always see the immediate benefit from the trade missions. I can also share that the work we do in promoting the various seafood expos that take place throughout the world. So there is Seafood Expo North America, where we would have, I can't quantify the number, but in the dozens of Nova Scotian companies that attend that, and I've been told that is a great place where meetings take place. We help facilitate some where appropriate. We have representatives from Invest Nova Scotia that go with us to make sure that the right conversations are being had between the right people. And then following the Seafood Expo North America that takes place in March, in May annually, there's Seafood Expo Global, which is the world's largest seafood show. And we don't have as many companies from Nova Scotia that travel there, but there's still more than 10, less than 20 in that range that attend, either participating in the Canadian pavilion, in our Canadian booth, our portion of the booth, or larger companies like the Clearwater that you referenced today, or the Cook Aquaculture. They would have their own standalone booths. So promoting and supporting those market diversification is incredibly important to work away from the tariffs. We also can look at the provincial budget from this year, where we have a sizable deficit of $697 million, and then the next line item immediately below that is a contingency for tariffs. And we put that in there to be forward-thinking, to be somewhat protective of what may or may not happen. Hopefully, we don't have to use it. Hopefully, Tuesday comes and goes, and the president changes his mind once again. Time will tell. And you also heard me speak today in my speech about the additional $200,000. It's going directly to the marketing department for export development and expanding, exploring new markets. And I will say, just to add, that when I talked earlier about the seafood shows that we attend annually, the fishing community in Nova Scotia, obviously, there's a vast number of harvesters and a vast number of crew members, but there's a smaller number of buyers and processors and exporters. So I've had the opportunity and the good fortune to get to know quite a few of them very, very well over the last almost 2 years in this role. But we also see the same people a lot of the time. So we took it upon ourselves, once the threat of tariffs was getting closer and more worrisome, to say, okay, we have more people in this industry who might only be exporting to the U.S., and they might not be aware of how to export to places other than the U.S. So we took proactive steps to send a letter out to industry and said, here's the gentleman's name at Invest Nova Scotia that knows everything about exporting to all markets, and here's information on the seafood show in Boston, and here's information on the seafood show in Barcelona. Please reach out to us. We are happy to help teach you how to export to places other than the U.S. So again, I haven't spoken to those senators, although Senator Colin Deacon, is that the senator? So he's a constituent of mine as well, lives on the Eastern Shore. I know him very, very well. So with this, knowing that there's a push from Senator Deacon, I will definitely I'll definitely reach out to him and have a conversation. But I'm just we're obviously very aware of the threat. As I spoke to you before the committee meeting, saying that every province would have a number one resource or number one export to the U.S. So every province is worried about that number one export. Ours is seafood, and I'm proud of the work that the department is doing to be ready to combat tariffs if they come into play. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the Honourable MLA for Halifax Chebucto.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that answer. I look forward to hearing more about your conversations with Maine, because I know they're two related. And then you answered my next question, which is actually about diversification. And I know that Newfoundland just gave their fisheries industry $6 million to explore new markets. I would love to hear more about your expos and bringing Nova Scotia seafood all around the world, in particular Asia. And I'm curious if we are able to financially support stakeholders to get to these expos, and if there's supports in play to get someone to North Korea or to South Korea. In having conversations with folk, they're very encouraging of levels of government showing up at expos. So I'd love to hear what the plan is for maybe the next year in expos, and how we're helping folk get there.
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
I recognize that voice. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks again to the member for the question. So I have a lot to say.
Great.
I have a lot to say. I will start with the trade missions and trade shows. And I will say that what I have been told, what has been relayed to me, is that having the minister present on missions like this and at expos, it adds a level of credibility to the mission, particularly when we visit the Asian market. So the Asian market recognizes that we must be taking it pretty darn seriously if we're sending a minister to lead these conversations and to lead these trade missions. So I don't feel particularly important, but on those missions, it makes a difference, is what I've been told. And even as recent as the one we took to Europe last month, it was made. They made no bones about it that there were several meetings that people were having trouble getting finalized, and then they learned that the minister was attending, and the doors opened up a little bit more easily than they would have in the past. You asked specifically about having supports for our companies to attend these shows. I have some of the details here, but I know that Invest Nova Scotia definitely has programs to help support export development. And I don't want to get into reading the entire answer out, but I will summarize it as best as I can for you, for the member, through the chair. Diversification efforts are focused on the EU and Indo-Pacific markets, where Canada has free trade agreements and favorable conditions for market access. So I can expand on that a little bit to say, in our South Korean visit last year, it was really, really telling to look at when Canada signed a free trade agreement with South Korea was in 2015. And our exports to South Korea over time, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, jumped drastically from 2015 onward. And so now they're in the top 5 of our export destinations. Our market development efforts include seafood trade missions to support Nova Scotian seafood companies, business networking receptions, product awareness and education, culinary initiatives. So that's another important piece of the trade shows as well. So in Barcelona last year, we brought a Nova Scotian chef with us to prepare lobster in a way that was unique and delicious. And so we weren't just sharing the delicious, normal, conventional steamed lobster. She'd prepared it. I can't even remember how it was so delicious. I didn't know I ate dozens of them while we were perusing the show. So that's just another way to help promote, because what we've learned is that oftentimes when we're trying to break into an emerging market, sometimes the recipients of the product aren't fully aware of how to cook it or how to prepare it or how to present it. So another important aspect is educating chefs. And that was very keenly aware and brought to the forefront when we visited the Philippines last year. We visited a cooking school that had a partnership through COVID with the NSCC, and we had a lot of fanfare, and we cooked paella with the Federal Minister of Agri-Foods, Minister Macaulay, who, funnily enough, that was the same trip where he made the famous post of eating a lobster at Burger and Lobster in Kuala Lumpur, and he initially took a lot of flack for posting that picture, and locally it was the exact opposite. He took a lot of praise for his indulgence in our local lobster and promoting it worldwide. I believe it was a viral picture. So perhaps I'll leave it there and can be more. I can circle back if there's any more follow-up that you need. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. I recognize the member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you, Chair. So far you've mentioned South Korea, the Philippines, Barcelona. Where else are these expos taking the sector? Or where else are the sector? Yeah, you get there.
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the question. So there are generally three major seafood expos annually. The one I spoke about in Boston, Seafood Expo North America, and then one in Barcelona, Seafood Expo Global, and then one in Singapore that takes place in September, and that is Seafood Expo Asia. On top of that, I can also share the other locations that we've traveled historically that the department has explored. And what we do in these situations is work with the seafood group, like I said before, but we also do it strategically in countries that have historically high consumption of seafood. So places that can't meet their own demand with their own supply, those are what we would call emerging or potential markets. So in February of 2024, Seoul, South Korea, Manila, the Philippines, and Hong Kong. I had 14 meetings at that on that mission with the Canadian ambassadors in each of the countries that we attended. That was where we did the visit to the seafood school, the culinary school. We had a Savor Nova Scotia dinner at the ambassador's house in Manila. In March of 2024, we went to Boston, and that one was really, really nice because it was the first time that I had a chance to meet all of the other fisheries and aquaculture ministers from the Atlantic region. They all attend that show. All 4 Atlantic premiers attend that show, so it really, really highlights the importance of the industry for our region of the country. And at that show, I had 15 meetings, met with importers, sector stakeholders, international seafood associations. I met with Nova Scotian companies and had bilateral meetings with other ministers. The Seafood Expo to Spain, it was April of last year. We had 10 meetings there, meeting with the seafood business, starting with the seafood reception. We had 100 global attendees and almost every Nova Scotian who was there with us. We asked them to join us as well. I didn't attend this one, but there were representation in Singapore in September of last year, and the team had 21 meetings, in-depth meetings with key players in the import market in Singapore. And I do have some other ones here. This was the most recent one I've spoken about already, to Italy, France, and the UK. I could go through the results. There's some real value in these trade missions, and I won't share the names of the companies, but we have, from the export cafes in 2024, we have these companies. These aren't our numbers. These are the results that we get from the companies after the fact, and say, tell us about your experience on this trade mission. Tell us if you've made good connections with importers and you think it's likely to turn into sales. So we have the South Korea, Philippines, Hong Kong one last year. Estimated long-term sales, $16 million. The Seafood Expo North America last year, estimated long-term sales for the province, $12.5 million. Seafood Expo Global for the province could realize $34.2 million. Seafood Expo Asia, 1.2, but that's also an emerging market, and that is something that, given the Trump tariffs that are likely or unlikely or uncertain, that is the target area for us now to go back to Asia. So we will likely be attending that show this year. There's another large show in Spain that 4 Nova Scotian companies attended last year, and that they are telling us it could turn into $6.1 million in sale. There's a Chinese Seafood Expo that we had 11 Nova Scotian companies that attended, $14.2 million in long-term sales. And then the Export Cafe that we just completed, the estimation is about $6.3 million in annual ongoing sales. So all that adds up to long-term sales of $82.5 million with room for growth as well.
I recognize the member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you. I do just want to be clear that I think these are incredibly important. And I also agree that it is very important that the minister is there, especially in Asia. It does come with a heavier weight in Asia, and I think they're very, very important. Thank you for sharing the numbers, because that was my next question. So I just wanted to see how success was measured. So thank you very much. Other provinces have done a really great job marketing and branding their seafood. Like, we've all heard of PEI oysters. You did mention very briefly about a branding exercise. I'd love to hear more about that. Is there a Nova Scotia seafood coming this way?
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the member. I didn't like marketing in university. It wasn't one of my favorite courses at all. And even when I was a small business owner, I was in the garbage business, so I didn't really need to market. Everyone had garbage, and they put it at the curb, and we picked it up, and we made our money that way. It wasn't really until I got into this job as Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture that I put a lot more value on the brand. And I am, one tattoo visit away from having the seafood brand tattooed on my shoulder. I just am very, very impressed with the work that our marketing team has done over the last few years to promote and generate a very, very solid brand. I know for a fact that forget the logo, which I love also, but the sense, the feeling, the knowledge that people have worldwide of our seafood and how delicious it is, how we are unique with our cold, clean, pristine waters, how safe our seafood is, how sustainably harvested it is. We have an incredible brand reputation worldwide, and that's just what people say. The practical uses of our brand, I'm not sure if the member has had a chance to see my car, but I have taken the opportunity to decal my car with the brand because I feel that strongly and that passionately about the work that our department does, and now have a full understanding of how valuable the industry is and how valuable the harvesters are and how valuable the buyers and processors are to our province in every different way that I spoke about in my opening remarks. We are one of the few departments that has a dedicated marketing arm because of how important it is. We promote the Nova Scotian brand as often and as frequently as we can. We have a budget annually for I don't want to say swag, but it's swag, and we have just recently completed an amazing seafood video that will be debuted at the Boston Seafood Show. And I've had the opportunity to review it now a couple of times. It's an incredible piece of digital marketing that catches the eye. It sounds great. It looks great. It's incredibly appealing. And I know that it's going to make people stop and watch for the 2 minutes that they're in front of the screen. when we travel with the Atlantic Seafood Group, it is quite a unique relationship. So the organizers of the trade mission are all 4 Atlantic provinces. In the 2 trips that I've gone on, I'm the only minister that attends. The other ministers just don't. And I can only relate that to the fact that $2.5 billion worth of exports for our province, they don't have that much. They would have a significant amount, but it's our number one by almost 2.5 times. So when I'm speaking at these events and representing the brand, I have to toe a very delicate line. I am obviously incredibly biased towards Nova Scotian seafood, but I have to be cognizant of the fact that I'm there representing Atlantic Canada. And there have been a couple of occasions where not my fingers, but just maybe one finger got a little bit slapped because I did too much of promoting Nova Scotian and not enough of promoting all 4 Atlantic provinces. But I'll beg for forgiveness and instead of asking for permission in that case, because my job, part of my job is to be a representative and be an advocate for Nova Scotian seafood. And I take a great deal of pride in that job. And as I said right off the hop, I do believe I have the best job in all of government. And I think the team behind me would nod and smile and say that I'm a decent brand ambassador for the province. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the member for Halifax-Shabukdo.
Thank you very much. So I'm just a little bit more on that. When Nova Scotia lobster is in Spain, like the announcement yesterday with Nova Scotia Loyal and the sticker that's going on things, which is fantastic, is that similar to a lobster tail that's in Barcelona, or is there actually a Nova Scotia sticker on it? Sorry, that's incredibly specific, but thank you.
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So off the hop, I'll say no, there are not dedicated stickers. You can imagine the challenge of trying to stick a sticker or do something like that with a wet, slimy lobster. Probably wouldn't last very long. But to your point, in almost every city that we've visited for trade missions, we take time to go to local markets. And when we go to these local markets, we are on the hunt for Canadian or Nova Scotian lobster. And I will say that some markets are better than others, but they're certainly in South Korea, the amazing market that we visited there. they had a whole, that like it was clearly identified. If it was a Canadian lobster, I wouldn't expect those markets to get down into which province it came from, but they certainly identified Canadian lobster because it's a premium quality product. And they want people attracted to the Canadian lobster just as much as we want them to be able to purchase it from their markets. So that was nice to see. And even in not just markets, but in conventional grocery stores, they don't typically carry lobster per se. Some do, some don't, in my experience. But we're constantly on the hunt for Nova Scotian seafood when we're out in market looking to see where our products have ended up. I'll say a couple other things that I didn't say in my initial answer on branding. So I spoke too much about the car and the swag without sharing exactly what the brand, the logo looks like, and that's just because I got too excited. I apologize. So it is a square with a line from one corner to the other, and it has the coordinates of 4563 on it. And the significance of 45 latitude, 63 longitude are that those coordinates line up to be the dead center of our province. So while not necessarily known for its lobster in the dead center of the province, it is the heart of Nova Scotia, and lobster is at the heart of our economy. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that. I also wanted to share that there was historically a federal program to help with marketing, the Canadian Fish and CFSO. Seafood Opportunities Fund, CFSOS. There's so many acronyms in this job. That fund no longer exists. So that was a federal investment that we would welcome it to come back and help with marketing our lobsters and all other seafood products that we send to the world. So I wanted to make sure that I got that on the record. And the last thing I wanted to say on it is that I'll go back to your marketing and looking for stickers, that there's a push right now that we are quasi-leading as a department to improve the traceability from trap to plate. And we know that there are companies right now out there who are working hard to be in that space and provide the technology to harvesters and to buyers and processors and exporters alike to help identify where the lobster has come from and which plant it went to either be impounded or processed, and then where it was exported to. So that is work that is ongoing, and I would love to sit here next year and talk to you about it more and tell you what a successful year it's been in improving the traceability of lobster. We know that there's a chance that the U.S. may require it in the future, and that would be something that would motivate our companies to get it done a lot faster. I think that's all I need to say about that for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you, Chair. I am reminded of sometimes when I'm traveling, I open up a menu and I see PEI oysters on the menu. And that feeling, you're like, oh, that feels really great. I would love to someday travel and open up and see Nova Scotia lobster or Nova Scotia oysters. I think that would be great. And if we're all working towards it, I think that's a great thing for our province. So I'm going to move to the next topic. I'm curious if the department have been working with the federal government on whether or not there'll be an Alver season this year. These are bigger questions. Thank you.
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How to start this one and be nice and polite. One of the things that's really key to this job is that some of the really, really contentious issues in fisheries and aquaculture, my department doesn't have any say in it whatsoever. We don't play any role in enforcement of illegal activity on the water when it comes to illegal harvesting of lobster or other seafood. We don't play any role in quota decisions. And that has led to, as you can imagine, a great deal of frustration when I look at the value that the industry brings to our province, and then I'm forced to deal with a federal minister who doesn't see it the same way that we do. And I've been disappointed at almost every turn with my interactions with the federal minister and the federal department. And again, I'm being as polite as I can be right here, because the people that I meet with who are impacted by these decisions that the federal minister has made, they have fallen on deaf ears. So when we talk about the Elver season that has been canceled for, I think, the last 2, it's been canceled because DFO cannot figure out a way to enforce it properly. And I worry that there could be the same peril for our lobster industry because DFO cannot figure out a way to enforce illegal harvesting properly. With the Elver situation, it's an incredibly important fishery. It's $50 million annually. That is, we are the blueberry capital of the world, and I think our blueberry exports are in the $120 million range, right? Blueberry capital of the world, $120 million, and Elvers, little Elvers, $50 million. So it shows you a little bit of the scale of where it is in the spectrum. We have a limited number of licensed harvesters, and the decision that the federal minister made originally to cut quota and redistribute it was not brought forward with a great deal of thought and consideration how it would impact people, nor did any of these harvesters who would have ended up with quota, the vast majority of them that we've spoken to, they didn't want this. They were happy to go to work, and they were happy to work for someone and not have the member's been a small business owner. There are a lot of responsibilities that come with being a small business owner that if you're maybe I shouldn't have spoken ill of the DFO minister. But I believe the member gets my point on that one, that some people, they would just like to go to work and not have overhead responsibility, not have staffing responsibilities, not have to figure out how to store these Elvers, how to export these Elvers. These folks weren't, that's not the kind of job that they were looking for. If they wanted to be an Elver fisherman, they just wanted to go and catch Elvers. So again, it's another example for us of, number one, DFO mismanagement of a file that has incredibly damaging impact on the ground, and number two, action by our department. So we've had a moratorium in place on buying and processing licenses since 2018. And in response to this proposal that the minister put forward of redistributing quota and offering it up for people who had been in the industry, there were not enough buyer's licenses in the province to make that work. So we looked at it and said, well, if this is the decision that DFO is making that we don't agree with, they get to make that decision. What can we do as a department to help these people who are impacted? So we took steps to put in temporary buyer's licenses for Elvers, and had it played out, I mean, I think there is one company that is planning to move forward, but that was an exceptional decision that we had to make in order to support Nova Scotia and the Nova Scotian companies. I believe that's everything.
I recognize the member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you. To the minister, I understand it's complicated. I will ask one more question about it. will there be a moderate livelihood elver fishery? Do you think? Let me rephrase that. Is the province working with the federal government on a moderate livelihood elver fishery? Yeah, thank you.
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the member for the really, really important question, because it truly is an important aspect of the fishery that needs consideration. And I believe the entire fishing community, both First Nations and commercial harvesters alike, would welcome some type of decision on that. As you've heard me say a couple of times already, the decision on moderate livelihood fishing and First Nations access to fishing is federal. And so my department is keenly aware of what's taking place, but we don't get to have input on the conversation. We are not at the table. This is a nation-to-nation conversation that takes place between the First Nation groups in Nova Scotia and the nation of Canada. I can say that the federal minister, in one of our first meetings before our friendship hits a rock and a bump in the road, did indicate to me that there is an appetite to move forward with some type of moderate livelihood fishery that supports conservation, that supports the existing commercial fisheries, and that supports First Nations. So there needs to be unity in those relationships. She was very clear to me that conservation is paramount. Conservation and protecting of whatever species we're talking about, whether it is lobster, whether it is elvers in this case, that has to be the starting point of the conversation. I'm not privy to where negotiations are, where conversations are. I see news like the rest of Canada sees that not too long ago there was an offer from the federal government of $260 million, I believe, to invest in First Nation fishing, and that offer was subsequently rejected. But I can't speak any. Pardon me. I can't speak any more detailed on the conversations or the relationship. But I just know that conservation is extremely important, obviously, for future economic benefits. That respecting commercial harvesters and taking certainly into account the First Nations rights are incredibly important.
I recognize the member for Halifax-Shabukto.
I thank the minister for that thoughtful answer. Thank you. And it's almost like the minister and I have done this before, because my next question is on conservation. I am curious, as I understand the elver fishery, they're caught here as babies. and then we ship them mostly to Asia, as I understand it. And I think when they get to Asia, the expression I've heard was they're grown out and sexed. Is that something we could do here in Nova Scotia to expand the industry?
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you to the member for the question. I guess I would say anything is possible. As the market has evolved for elvers, this is historically how it has evolved, in that the elvers are sent overseas, they are grown out. That is where the most demand for the product is. So I guess we could look at doing something like that here. It certainly wouldn't be something that would be initiated by the department. It could be something that would be supported by the department. But where the demand is in Asia, in Japan, is high demand. They have the infrastructure in place there to grow out and process. I think I'll leave it there. Yeah, thank you.
I recognize the member for Halifax Shabukto.
Thank you to the minister. I'm happy with that answer. I was just maybe a yes and, just an idea. And continuing on conservation, can removing or fishing large amounts of elvers disrupt the food chain and have an impact on the overall health of our ecosystem? And do we know how many is too many?
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope you don't accuse me of a recurring theme, bringing up a recurring theme. But at the risk of being accused of bringing up a recurring theme, my answer will begin by saying that quota management is entirely the responsibility of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And when we talk about the sustainability of a biomass, we rely on science. And there's lots of DFO science that leads into decisions on what is a safe amount for a quota or a TAC, a total allowable catch. In this instance, with respect to elvers, the quota for elvers is just under 10,000 kilograms a year. It's 9,986 kilograms per year, I believe. And it has been that number for a long time. And one of the issues with that quota being the same is the issue of DFO not following the science, not understanding the science, because we don't necessarily have good science. There is a project on the East River in Chester whereby annual reports on quota were meant to be used as a baseline. And each year, that river was studied for what the quantity of elvers that were going through that river, and that would be an indicator of how healthy the stock is. And unfortunately, due to DFO mismanagement and lack of enforcement, that study has gone by the wayside. We have tried as a department to help out as much as we can, but our limited resources don't necessarily mean that we can do everything that we'd like to do also. Especially, we have a hard time doing everything that we want to do that falls under our responsibility, let alone trying to spend some of our provincial money on a federal responsibility. It makes it challenging, but we will always do what's in our purview to do. The interesting thing to note with the quota and looking at import numbers from Hong Kong, so as I said, our quota is just under 10,000 kilograms. We know that because of the illegal activity and because of the lack of enforcement, there's a significant number higher than 10,000 kilograms, especially in the event when the price goes from its typical $1,000 a kilogram to $5,000 a kilogram. But the interesting thing to note is in Hong Kong, they have documented imports that are 2 or 3 times higher than our quota. So those elvers are coming from somewhere, and it is incredibly worrisome for the safety of the biomass and future sustainability. But the bigger concern, as I will end with the theme of DFO mismanagement, is that we don't know what the exact numbers are, and that's a DFO responsibility.
With 6 minutes remaining, I recognize the member for Halifax-Chebucto.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the minister because I think you did answer my question. 6 minutes remaining, no pressure. I'd like to chat about oysters a little bit. They're some of my family's favorite. And I'm wondering how we're supporting the development of an oyster industry in Nova Scotia. Thank you.
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you to the member. Questions like these make me smile because we have done so much in the last 2 years to help promote not only oysters but the entire seafood market. What I will say to start, though, is the member referenced earlier being in a restaurant and seeing PEI oysters on the menu, which is great. I think that's wonderful for that province and for their economy. The scale, again, to give it a little bit of context, in PEI, they export between $50 and $60 million worth of oysters. That's the value to their economy. In Nova Scotia, as it stands, as of last year, and it might even this might even be 2023 numbers, but it was $4.7 million. So they're 10, 12 times larger than us in terms of oyster production, and that is problematic because we have similar ocean conditions here that they do. And so what has my department done? What has our team done to help promote aquaculture, specifically oysters? I will start talking, and I believe we'll get to the 6-minute mark by the time before I'm finished talking. So in the opening remarks, you heard me talk about the aquaculture development area. That is the first in Canada aquaculture business park. So to get approval, sometimes, and it's been reported that it can be a long and cumbersome journey, but it has to be, right? We need to make sure we have the checks and balances in place so that approvals, when they are done, we can be confident that we've done everything that we should be doing to protect all the various groups that we need to protect in the environment, of course. With the aquaculture development area, all of the challenging work was done at the beginning. And all of the assessments and approvals and sampling and everything that needed to be done was done in advance. So we know that these 53 sites, they're suitable for aquaculture development. If we had capacity in our department to open up all 53 of them, I think the aquaculture team would be upset with me for saying this, but we opened up 6 for application because we are a small department of 82 team members, and that was with the capacity that we had. And Deputy Hollett is a really hard boss. So that's one thing that we've done. That's first in Canada, aquaculture development area. 53 sites, 6 have been tendered, 5 of them awarded. That's growth in the industry. Number 2, site reallocation. So there's about 236 aquaculture sites in the province. 30 of them are land-based, 30 of them are open net pens. So about 160, 170 approved licenses, and a number of those are unused for one reason or another. Many of the unused ones would have been former mussel farms that had aquatic invasive species, or the mussel that wasn't economically feasible to keep growing mussels. But those sites have already gone through the rigorous process of being approved. So what we've done in the last year and a half is, I believe the number is 14, taken 14 of those sites and put them back out for tender and accepted proposals. And there are a number of other ones that will be coming back on again. The human resources in the team is managed effectively, and we do what we can with what we have. The third thing that I'll say is we made amendments to the Fisheries and Coastal Resource Act in 2024, and that was a monumental change for aquaculture. In 2015, the Aquaculture Review Board was put in place, and that is the entity that makes decisions. Up until last year, that was the entity that made decisions on all aquaculture leases in the province. It's an independent third party by application, long, lengthy process that I would say that we did not...
Order, please. Sorry, Minister, the time has elapsed for the NDP. In absence of the Liberals, we will turn over the next hour to the PC caucus. I recognize the member for Victoria-on-the-Lakes.
Minister, I would like for you to finish your comments. Thank you.
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
So I knew I was going to get to the end of that time. So Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act, up until last year, all decisions on shellfish and aquaculture production had to go through the independent third-party Aquaculture Review Board. And we heard from industry. We probably received a fair amount of criticism on the ARB, just mainly due to the length of time that it took to get an approval across the finish line. And so the team is very receptive to conversation and trying to make things streamlined and more efficient, and our government's philosophy is more faster. So we made those changes to the Fisheries and Coastal Resource Act that removed aquaculture, removed shellfish and marine plants from having to go to the Aquaculture Review Board for decision making. And we're in the process right now of finalizing the regulations that will go with that, but we will be able to approve things, we estimate, between 6 and 12 months faster under the new decision making as opposed to going through the Aquaculture Review Board. There are a number of other things that go into making aquaculture better and easier and more streamlined in this province. The coastal classification system is a fantastic tool that we will use to inform. It won't be a decision-making tool, but it'll be for information, looking at the perimeter of the province and where aquaculture may be suitable and where it might not be suitable. I'll leave it there for now, and let's.
I recognize the member for Victoria-on-the-Lakes.
I noticed you just had a recent announcement to look for some feedback on the mapping. Could you send some comments on that and timelines for it?
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to my colleague for the question. And I'm thrilled to talk for a moment about the coastal classification survey that went live in February, and I believe it's open until March 15th. I encourage all of our colleagues to take a moment to complete the survey. So in a nutshell, it starts with a high-level overview of what the coastal classification system is, what some of the parameters will be for the CCS, the coastal classification system, so looking at water temperature, water depth, current activity, things like that, and then seeking feedback from Nova Scotians. So we have a history in our department of proactivity and trying to make sure that we put out as much information as we possibly can. There have been times in the past that the department has received criticism for not being transparent, and I'd like to think that the information that we have out online is absolutely an incredible outlaying of information. So this is another tool and another aspect where we're seeking consultation and feedback on this survey. We know that the coastal classification system will be a wonderful resource. Again, not a decision-making tool, but a wonderful resource for where aquaculture may be more suitable in the province than other places. So thank you again for the question and giving me the opportunity to speak about the CCS.
I recognize the member for Waverly Fall River Beaver Bank.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to thank you for the work you've done by keeping our seafood on the world stage and continuing to promote it. Even though it sounds sexy and exotic, traveling around all these wonderful nations promoting our product, it's really tough to be away from home those times, be away from your constituency. So I thank you for that. But I really want to talk about species and migration patterns. Because of global warming, we know that species change. And I always wonder if we're having, species that are coming up from south. Sometimes I wonder if Donald Trump's going to put a gate there and make us pay a tariff on them. But what are some of the new species that may be harvestable and marketable for Nova Scotia fishers?
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
I'd like to thank the member for the questions. They're really, really insightful. The member's been here for a little bit to know that much of the quota decisions and seasons and the bigger decisions with respect to the fishery are made by Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So it's with their studies on tracking biomasses and the safety and health of a biomass that they make those decisions on what the quota should be or what new species could be bought, sold, marketed, processed, all of those things. I will say, and this does give me the opportunity to come back to the lobster vulnerability study that was done by CMAR last year, that showed that lobster is moving ever so slightly north. The member is correct on that, but we're not in a worrisome place right now. But the thing to note about that is that there are opportunities and risks. So we know that Maine lobster catches are down slightly, so that is potentially part and parcel with lobsters moving a little bit north, which for us would be an opportunity. But as the lobster, if it carries on moving north, then that can be a bit of a risk. What we've also seen with respect to different species in our province is the beginning of this lobster season, a lot of Southwest Nova harvesters were finding large quantities of Jonah crab in their traps. And it was expressed to me that this is the first time that a lot of folks who have been fishing for a while could remember this. And so there's certainly work to be done there to figure out what attracted, other than just the bait, what attracted the Jonah crab to the lobster traps. And once work is done on that, perhaps there's a new and emerging market for Jonah crab. Right, so we're constantly looking at things like that and how we can support the industry, but it also gives light to the fact that we know that wild catch is changing, and wild catch is not the same today as it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, which highlights the importance of our aquaculture sector and highlights the fact that the changes we've made provincially to create new lease areas, to make it easier for people to get into the market. I think about Ernie Porter in Antigonish, who spent 3, 4, 5 years going through the Aquaculture Review Board hearing process to ultimately get an approval. And his company is going to be growing oysters a heck of a lot faster than most other companies based on the technology that he invented. And if we had made changes to regulations years ago, they would be a much different company right now than they are today. But I say that to say that wild catch is now second to aquaculture in global food production. There was a recent report in June of 2024 from the FAO, the Food and Aquaculture Organization that falls under the World Health Organization, that estimates and predicts that we need a heck of a lot more aquaculture worldwide to feed the world population. And if we don't start increasing the amount of aquaculture that globally, there could be some serious concerns for food security in the future. So thank the member for the question.
I recognize the member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the minister, just a question around promoting sport fishing in our province. Obviously, I wear the tourism hat as well, but the other aspect of that would be even just general residents that want to get into sport fishing and understand where to go and all that good stuff. But just, I guess my question is, what's the department doing to promote the sport fishing sector?
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the Minister of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage for the question. And I appreciate it because it gives me a chance to talk about how valuable sport fishing is, both from an economic standpoint for our province. So historically, sport fishing has brought in about $70 million in revenue to the province, which is pretty substantial when you think about it. And as I referenced in my opening remarks, promoting it to non-Nova Scotians, so people who are coming here for destinations, those folks historically pay, they spend a lot more money in the local economy than our local Nova Scotians. You would think, of course, of accommodations and food, and our locals wouldn't have to spend that money. So it's a great way to stimulate the economy. And then on the flip side, it's also a great, healthy, fun outdoor activity. I had never fly fished in my life until last May, when we were down doing a visit to the St. Mary's River and met with Scott Beaver, and the work that they've done there on some watershed restoration is impressive. And after we were done with the tour and the technical part, we got to go and do some fly fishing. And I caught a fish that was this big. Not true. That's so the importance of sport fishing is incredibly valuable to the province. And then when you add on the Sport Fish Habitat Fund, Again, I spoke just ever so briefly about it in my opening remarks. So on almost every fishing license in the province, there's a $5.91 levy that goes towards I said the name of this, the Sportfish Habitat Fund, and that has generated annually about $250,000 to $300,000, and license fees generates between 1.5 and 1.8 million annual. Apologies, and the revenue directly contributes to the Inland Division operational budget. So it's done some great work in helping to do restoration work on rivers. A lot of that is in partnership with the Nova Scotia Salmon Association, who are obviously well known to the department. We appreciate and value that organization and the work that they do to help promote sport fishing. So I believe I've shared a comprehensive answer. Oh, I would also like to share, this was a great feel-good story on sport fishing and hunting. So last year when we visited Cape Breton on a tour, we were able to present the winner of a lifetime hunting and fishing license. So I was at the annual general meeting for, I can't remember the name of the wilderness group, but it was in Truro. It was in the members' constituency, and it was the Nova Scotia Federation of Anglers and Hunters. There you go. So I ended up drawing this young man's name from the hat, and it turned out to be a 16 or 18-year-old young man from Cape Breton who is going to have a free hunting license, free fishing license for the rest of his life. So he will be able to take advantage of all the sport fishing and all the hunting that he wants to do for what's hopeful to be a long and happy life. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you. Minister, what opportunities do you see in the fisheries and aquaculture industry for Nova Scotia in the up and coming years?
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Ministerial Assistant Timmins for the question. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to look ahead and think about how successful our fisheries and aquaculture industries can be, and what are some of the opportunities that we have on the forefront for, let's be honest, primarily economic growth. That's what we've used our natural resource for a long, long time, and we're going to continue to use it for economic growth and development for the foreseeable future, I would speculate. So the opportunities out of the Trump tariffs, the potential for Trump tariffs, there's obviously opportunities to focus more on market diversification, which I've said 1,000 times already. It is not new for us. It's not new for the department to be looking for new markets, but certainly the conversation has been magnified with respect to the comments and the threat that could come from the U.S. So I'm excited to see what our marketing team can do, what Invest Nova Scotia and their export managers can do to help Nova Scotian companies find new homes for their product. I'm incredibly optimistic. As I've said before, our product is loved worldwide. And so it's just a matter of doing everything that we can do provincially through our department and again through Invest and through the Department of Growth and Development to help make sure that the logistics behind getting seafood from point A to point B are there and reliable. The last thing we want is a load of live lobster scheduled to fly overseas and have a plane canceled or something like that. So the logistics is something that is a big opportunity for us as well, making sure that we can get our product swiftly and efficiently to its destination. There's certainly opportunities as well for value-added steps in the process. So we have a number of companies working on new initiatives and being innovative with, I'll use an example of shell waste. So the member would know that shell waste is a big issue, being in the constituency that you represent and the company that is there that generates a significant amount of shell waste. So we have 2 or 3 companies in the province working diligently on how to do something productive with shell waste rather than send it to a landfill. There's one company that's working on a bioplastic that might be able to be used to make rope or make nets. So we're incredibly excited for what that company might be able to do. And I believe they've been supported by the AFF in the past, which would mean there'd be a small percentage of that was contributed by the province. So it's an incredible opportunity. And there's other opportunities in product valuization and full product utilization that Perennia in Truro is doing some great work looking at products and how to either use them differently or use the entire species rather than generating waste. We should be generating profits from them, correct? There's also a huge opportunity for greenhouse gas reduction. So I referenced it earlier in my opening remarks that through the climate change plan, there is a new fund that our department is in charge of and administers, the Fisheries and Aquaculture Energy Efficiency Improvement Fund, which is a mouthful, but that is a fantastic program that can help harvesters, processors, other people in the industry figure out ways to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. I'm certainly excited for a day when we see more lobster boats that adopt hybrid technology. So the complaints that I've heard, and the member would know from being on a lobster boat, that the fumes can be pretty strong. So what's been conveyed to me is that with today's technology, it's unlikely that lobster boats would go 100% electric based on the work that they do, but there's no reason that we couldn't see hybrid technology where boats would steam out to their fishing ground. They would switch over to electric power, and they would harvest with electricity and then steam back in to the port. So the savings on that for a boat owner would be significant. When you think about, I think about my time in the garbage business when running 15, 20 garbage trucks on the road, fuel was my largest expense. And if I could cut that expense in half, it would have been exceptionally meaningful to the bottom line because that money goes directly back on the bottom line. So that's an exciting opportunity for harvesters, certainly. I'm also incredibly inspired by what is possible through the seafood sector strategy. So when you think about our province and how reliant we are on seafood as an economic driver, it's interesting to me that we haven't put pen to paper and done the consultations to figure out what does a seafood sector strategy look like, and how can we put one together that is going to be beneficial for today and for the foreseeable future on how we're going to manage and direct the seafood industry in Nova Scotia. So that was an incredible ask from our department to say to see if we could have dedicated funds in this year's budget to make it happen. And we're incredibly thankful that we have received those funds and that we will be starting work on that seafood sector strategy immediately. I think those are some pretty solid pieces of optimism that I have. I'm also always optimistic about aquaculture. I know that the changes that we've made to make it easier for people to grow oysters, to grow sugar kelp, to grow scallops, we have made it easier to get growing in Nova Scotia. And it's just a testament to the Premier's mindset of more faster and building up Nova Scotia and focusing on our natural resources. And as I answered earlier, we know that wild catch is not the answer for food security, that aquaculture has to be a part of it. So it certainly made a heck of a lot of sense for us to make the changes that we've made and put a full court press on the aquaculture side of our department.
I recognize the member for Waverly Fall River Beaver Bank.
Thank you, Chair. So even though I represent and proudly represent Waverly Fall River Beaver Bank, I hail from Digby, which is right along St. Mary's Bay. So my question is going to be really about the illegal fishery. And I know a lot of people mix up what the illegal fishery may be, especially when it comes to our Indigenous fishers. I'm just wondering if you can describe exactly what the illegal fishery is, because it's, and I know it just doesn't happen around St. Mary's Bay and in that area, but if you could describe what that is, and I know you've spent a lot of time down there speaking to fishers, speaking to people that are affected in the industries, the processors, transportation, all of that. But what is the social and economic impact for that area?
I recognize the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member for the incredibly important question. I can only imagine the fear and uncertainty in the communities that you referenced. Having been there, having had face-to-face meetings with several of the fishers, having conversations with harvesters who have been shot at in drive-by shootings, who have had cottages arsoned. It's an incredibly, incredibly sad situation that the federal government is neglecting their responsibilities on. So the nature of what's taking place down there is so worrisome for public safety. I mean, a quick Google search of illegal lobster in St. Mary's Bay would show you several news articles of violence, and it would show you several news articles of criminal activity that is stemming from illegal lobster harvesting. And I'm not sure if all Nova Scotians realize what the impact can be. It's one of my biggest worries, to be perfectly honest, and it's the reason that our department has committed so much to trying to stop it. The issue, obviously, is that enforcement of illegal lobster harvesting is the responsibility of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And I spent most of the fall last year doing everything that me and the department could think of to try and be helpful to the situation. So based on previous conversations and desire from industry, we took steps last year to raise the fine for responsibilities under the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act. That is our piece of legislation. So we can now fine people, or a judge could now fine people up to $1 million for being involved in illegal activity under the Fisheries and Coastal Resource Act. The real work started with the federal government in August of last year, when we started composing and sending some unconventional letters from one level of government to another. I would say they were strongly worded, but they had to be to get attention. And the first one that we sent to ask for increased enforcement efforts was ignored for 4 weeks. And on the 4th week, we sent a follow-up letter asking for urgency, asking for attention, asking for help. And it was only after the second letter that we received a response. The federal minister agreed to meet with Deputy Hollett and I face-to-face. And so on October 3rd, we flew to Ottawa and sat down and in front of the minister showed her and explained to her what her inaction was doing and the fear and uncertainty and instability in the industry and what it was causing. And the response was, we are not prepared to do anything else. We are not doing anything differently. And at that time, she turned her attention to our department and pointed a finger at us and indicated that we could stop this by stopping the illegal cash sales, which to me, I found irresponsible of her. And I found it to be looking at it through a lens of, let's stop the second crime. Let's not worry about stopping the first crime, the harvesting of illegal lobster. We're going to focus on Nova Scotia, and you can stop the second crime. And I philosophically disagree with that. The illegal harvesting of lobster happens from the bottom of the ocean, and that's where it needs to stop. So from that point on, we realized that we did not have a helpful partner in this, and there was a request made from our department to the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, and we requested to have a dedicated conservation officer be working on the Fisheries and Coastal Resource Act, because those valuable members of our team, they are busy. They don't just enforce our act, they enforce the Environment Act, they enforce all different acts under provincial legislation. So to get a dedicated one was fantastic. And then we were able to convince our team that 2 more would make a big difference based on the impact that this is having on our fishery. And luckily, we were successful in that. So to go from having 0 dedicated fisheries and coastal resource officers, or conservation officers, to 3 is incredible. And then again, through support in this budget, it also is an example of our province's commitment to combating this illegal activity by the infusion of an additional $325,000 to help with enforcement efforts. Because our compliance officers are wonderful, amazing people who can go into a lobster pound or a processing facility or where have you, and do the work of seizing the documents, seizing the records, seizing the ledgers of these companies. But these folks are trained in forensic accounting. They're not trained to look at the numbers and see where there might be cause for concern. And so the money that we have earmarked in this budget, thankful to government for investing in it, is to outsource some forensic accounting to make sure that we can scrutinize the records and get to the bottom of this illegal activity sooner rather than later. I will just. Oh, I'll also say that the Premier even took steps to he read a resolution in the House last fall noting our support for the fishing industry and calling on the federal DFO to do more, we're not even asking them to do more, to be honest. We're asking them to do their jobs. And it's not the CMP officers that we're talking about, of course. Those folks are some of the hardest working people in any level of government, and what they face and the videos that I've seen of the persecution that they take, and the fact that it's documented that many of them went off work because they were fearful for their work conditions. No criticism to those folks whatsoever, but the direction that they get from senior leadership and the resourcing that they get is insufficient, and that is what we're calling on for the federal government to look after, is properly resourcing the folks that are on the ground. And as a province, again, the Premier is behind this completely. He, in the mix of my letters to the federal DFO minister, the Premier also sent a letter to the Prime Minister asking for the Prime Minister to take charge and step in and direct folks to do what they're required to do. We've also had the Minister of Justice last fall send letters to the federal minister asking for additional resources and supports. And I will tell you through the chair to the member that this is an incredibly concerning situation, that we are now on the cusp of another summer season of what potentially could be unauthorized harvesting. So it is part of our work to keep the federal minister's heels to the fire and make sure that we, for once in 7-8 summers, see some action on the ground, action on the wharfs to combat this illegal activity, as it is very, very worrisome for the future of our most valuable natural resource. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the honourable member from Waverley Fall River, Beaverbank.
Thank you for that detail, and I know you went really deep on that. I just had a follow-up. I have a lot of family on my mom's side, and as a matter of fact, on my mom's side, they were all fishers for the most part, still are. You know, on my mom's side were the Starks and the Robichaux, so I go all the way down that shore. So I've heard from friends and family that not just what's coming onto the shores of Nova Scotia, but there's also illegal fishing happening offshore. So my understanding is they may be Americans that are coming up, or from other countries that are coming to our waters. Can you tell me your conversations with DFO again on what they're doing for illegal fishing that's off our shores of Nova Scotia, and perhaps the illegal harvest is going offshore as well to other countries?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I thank the member for the question. Again, when I start this answer, I have to give an apology to say we're on a recurring theme in this meeting today, in this committee, and that theme is DFO in action. So when we do see inshore, offshore illegal harvesting, that falls under their responsibility to look after. If that gets to the wharf, if it gets not to the wharf, if it gets to one of our processing facilities or one of our lobster pounds, then we have the 3 dedicated conservation officers that would be there to inspect and take action if necessary. I will say what is interesting about offshore is that, again, of course, it's the responsibility of DFO, but there was a major press release on October 1st of last year from DFO that talked a lot about the Indo-Pacific region and how they had dedicated a vessel and dedicated a crew to combating illegal fishing, and they were going to be based out of a port in Japan, and they were going to do a 1-month mission or a 2-month mission. I don't remember the details, but the highlight, the headline of the article, I will not forget, that DFO is investing in resources to combat illegal fishing in the Indo-Pacific region. And I took that press release that was issued by DFO to my meeting with the federal minister, and I asked her to just change the locations to St. Mary's Bay. Said, this is exactly what we have been asking you for. This is exactly what we have been advocating for, to protect our industry, to protect our lawful harvesters. And yet there were money, resources, a vessel dedicated, which we don't disagree with. Of course, we are we're a good global citizen, we're a good neighbor, and if this is part of what being a good citizen means, then sure, we'll help out. But it was, the timing of that announcement could not have been worse and could not have been more insulting to the folks in Clare and Yarmouth and Southwest Nova who've been dealing with this for up to 7 years, 8 years. So I say all that to say we need some help from DFO. They clearly have the capacity to do it if we're doing it in the Indo-Pacific region. And part of my job is to continue to find unique ways to compel the federal minister to take action on this file. Thank you to the member. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the Honourable MLA for Cole Harbour, Dartmouth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here, and good afternoon. You'll forgive me if you've already covered my question, but I'm new to the conversation, and I am curious about your thoughts. It wouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that U.S. tariffs are front of mind for all of us, and we would agree that they represent a real threat to the seafood sector. And so I'm just curious if you could share with us what things the department are doing to support the sector and to look for new markets.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member for the question. I brushed off my quarterback there just because I have talked about this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but I don't think we can overstate the value that we've placed on the U.S. market. It's certainly of our $2.5 billion of seafood exports, about half of it goes to or through the USA. So our department is taking this incredibly seriously. So I can start initially by talking about the trade missions that we organize and we are a part of, and how beneficial those have been. I read some statistics earlier on the last few trade missions that we've been on have generated what the companies are telling us. This isn't our numbers. These are the numbers that the companies are telling us, that the trade missions, that none of them are to the USA, could realize $82.5 million worth of annual ongoing sales in new and emerging markets. So trade missions are a regular part of business in the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. There's going to be no change to that philosophy, but what might change is maybe the frequency, maybe the destinations. We've seen some incredible success in the Asian market, particularly to China, which I know we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. That's what we're dealing with the U.S. issue, but we do have about 25% of our exports that go to China. China, but there's room in multiple other jurisdictions in Asia for growth. Japan is an emerging market for us, as well as the ones that are established have more capacity. So South Korea has a great deal more capacity. The seafood expos are annual events. There's several worldwide. One in Boston next month. One in Barcelona in May. So what I referenced earlier is that in our network of companies that we deal with regularly, it's not uncommon for us to see the same companies attending these shows. So whilst on the trade mission, Deputy Hollett and I were doing some brainstorming and thought, there's a lot more people in these industries than the ones that always come to the shows and that are always active participants in the shows. Now, the active participants do represent, they might be small in number, but they represent a large percentage of our exports. But we wanted to make sure that everyone that we know in the industry has information on how to be a part of these seafood shows, and that everyone in our industry that we know has access to Invest Nova Scotia. So we composed a letter on the train between France and Paris and London, and it's got the letter sent out that connected our industries with who to contact for the seafood shows and who to reach out to for at Invest Nova Scotia. A wonderful gentleman named Ben Forsyth, who's been on a couple of missions with us, and he's the lead for seafood export market development. So those are a couple of the trade shows and exports that we're doing to try and diversify our market. Another highlight for us, obviously, is the $200 million that's earmarked in this budget to help protect if Trump tariff comes into play next Tuesday. We took our $697 million deficit, which is a sizable number, and because we're so worried about the uncertainty of these tariffs, we added an additional $200 million on there that hopefully we don't have to use, but it's there as a contingency in case our industries need support. We have also increased the budget of our department. So I talked earlier in a previous answer about the $325,000 that's new money for enforcement efforts. We also have $200,000 annual and ongoing that is new money to be added to the marketing department. So we recognize that even before tariffs, 50% of your product can't go to one place, because one decision can cause that to go awry. So this money is used to help explore new markets. Oftentimes we engage in-market consultants. So that's a consultant who would live in this country and be able to connect either us or our companies that are a part of the trade mission, connect them with importers. And I know that the trip that we were just on, we had one in-market consultant who was fantastic and brought a large number of importers to meet with our Nova Scotian companies and our Atlantic Canadian companies. So those are a few of the things that we're doing to try and promote market diversification and be there to support our companies throughout this time of uncertainty.
I recognize the Honourable MLA for Bedford Basin.
Good district for somebody to talk about fish and aquaculture, Bedford Basin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Minister, thank you for this opportunity and for being here. So here's a fellow from Bedford who's never fished. Well, done a little bit of fishing, but I two things I want to start, a little bit of trivia before I get to my question. First is one of the last things I did on council, HRM council for 17 years, was to arrange for a heritage building in Bedford to be given for the price of $1 to the Atlantic Salmon Association. where they will have their meetings and store their artifacts and have meetings and educate the public and whatnot. So it's a group that I'm very fond of, and wanted them to have a home in this nice historic part of Old Bedford. So a little trivia for you. The other bit of trivia is, while not a fisher, I do, for about the last 23 years, I spent a fair bit of time in the area, the Malagash area, if you will, of Cumberland County. And so I have neighbors that are lobster fishers. Across from if I look out my living room window, I see PEI mussels being grown and harvested and taken to the wharf. That's exactly 1.1 kilometers from my house when we walk our two dogs, and also Malagash oysters, which of course are in the area, Mr. Purdy and others. So it's near and dear to me. My own background, of course, was in technology and economic development, et cetera, for many years. But I for about 6 years, I was honored to run a group called Nova Knowledge. And that Nova, and I think the opposition mentioned this the other day, that Nova means new, as well as taking the no out of Nova Scotia. Nova means new. And one of the things that we triumphed and trumpeted was the knowledge economy, the creative economy, the circular economy, the green economy. And so I became really interested in what I would call value-adding products. And this may be, I hope this is a question for you, Minister. It may overlap with the Minister of Growth and Development as well. I'd like to know a little bit more about, and this dovetails with what my colleague asked, I know how you try and develop new markets. And you need to do that because of what's going on in the States. I'm wondering about new products as well. And, you know, I'm a little bit out of this field now, but we used to really champion companies like Ocean Nutrition. We used to really champion companies like Acadian Sea Plants and what they were doing. And now I've got there's some really interesting things going on with sea cucumbers, for example, in our area. And I've had people that I'm going to put in touch with you and your team, I think, coming to me lately with new ideas of what they do with dulse and these sort of things. So in addition to looking for new products for that incredible amount of seafood that we ship, bearing in mind that Fisherman's Market and Clearwater are based in Bedford, maybe not my part of Bedford, but based in Bedford. What are we doing to help develop new products and new markets for new products of what I call the value-added sort of aspects of seafood and aquaculture? That makes sense.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Not stumped. Just trying to make sure we put together the best answer possible for you. We strive for continuous improvement here at the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. I'll start where you started with the Atlantic Salmon Federation and the building. I had a meeting with them several months ago where they told me all about the building. They're renovating it right now, is my understanding, and I'm really excited to go and visit and see if. I get the first invite. Fair enough. Earlier today, there was a table decoration that was a salmon that someone perceived it as an inappropriate prop, but it's not. It's no longer here. But it was. I got that as a gift from a member of the Atlantic Salmon Federation. So Nova Knowledge, great information sharing, and great topic of conversation, because earlier today I did talk a little bit about how full product utilization is something that we need to be focused on. I had never spoken about lobster shells or crab shells more in my life than I have in the last year and a half. So we have several companies in this province who are doing very productive work on taking shell waste and turning it into bioplastic. And so that is happening in at least 2 locations in the province right now. One of the companies has received Atlantic Fisheries funding to help and support. So that is exactly what the member was talking about, in trying to find new ways to turn what would be waste into what can be money in your bank account. So that's one. Perennia, it does wonderful work across the board. So they do work in the agriculture sector as well as supporting the seafood sector. So they've had a pilot project looking at seals for the last number of years. So there's interesting uses for seal oil. There's interesting uses for what could potentially be turned into pet food for your 2 dogs. Sorry, you only have 2. I have 3. So there's all kinds of full product utilization work that is taking place, but it does also give me the opportunity to highlight just the other projects and programs and supports that we have, and I'll go through the list very quickly to say the Atlantic Fisheries Fund, which I talked about earlier. It's a federal-provincial partnership, 70-30%. The results of that over the last 7 years have been fantastic. So some incredible investments in Nova Scotian companies that we're getting at discounted dollars, and they've made the industry better. The sad part about it is that it is sunsetting and it hasn't been renewed yet. So we've asked the feds, every time I see the minister, I've asked her to renew this fund, but it'll be expiring next March. The Freshwater Fisheries Research Cooperative, it's a provincial program, aids in determining the health and status of freshwater sport fishery and used to evaluate strategies to enhance and sustain freshwater sport fishery. I've already talked a little bit about the Sportfish Habitat Fund, certainly a provincial project that funds projects focused on the conservation and restoration of fish habitat and the improvement of public access, allowing for enhanced participation in the fisheries resource for all Nova Scotians. We last year in June, I think it was June 11th, in Eastern Passage, launched the Fisheries and Aquaculture Energy Efficiency Innovation Fund. Say that a few times rapidly and you'll be tongue-twisted. It is a $6.5 million fund that is open for applications for companies who are looking to improve their overall energy efficiencies. There's some nuances to it outside of that, and another little stream for research, but an incredible way for companies to look at ways to add value to their product or save money. The Fisheries and Aquaculture Climate Change Adaptation Fund is a provincial program. It's a new fund to support climate change adaptation needs in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, identified through climate change and vulnerability assessment. We have a marine debris cleanup fund that is provincially led, and it's funding to help remove debris from Nova Scotia's marine and freshwater shorelines. Funding is provided for shoreline cleanup, litter prevention, and recycling projects. So, again, back to the theme. The feds had a solid program for a long time of money that was earmarked for ocean cleanup, and they've terminated that funding. So we're trying to pick up a little bit of the slack. Obviously, we don't have the resources to put as much money or people behind it as we would like, but it's something that is certainly an area where we're helping as much as we can. The Aquaculture Research and Development Fund is another provincial fund that supports research and development projects that come from science to address industry challenges and encourage further innovation in aquaculture. So we know, and I've said several times, how important aquaculture is going to be for the future food security in the world, with wild catch being now in second place to aquaculture when it comes to seafood production. So anything that we can do to support aquaculture is something that we're going to be behind. We have the Fisheries and Aquaculture Student Bursary Program as well. It's an initiative aimed towards Nova Scotian students to enhance the existing workforce. So oftentimes the companies that we interact with are, we deal with the managers or owners of plants and facilities, and labor is a constant challenge that we hear about regularly. So the idea behind this fund is to get young people interested.
Order. Time for the government has expired, and now give me a minute. I now recognize the Honourable MLA for Halifax-Chebucto.
That's me. Thank you. I just have a few more questions. When we finished off earlier, we were talking about oysters, so I'd like to go back. You may have heard about the MSX oyster disease outbreak in PEI, and unfortunately I think now it is also in Nova Scotia. I'm just curious what investments are in place for solutions.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the member for the question. Certainly, the news out of Prince Edward Island last summer was pretty worrisome for industry. MSX is a parasite disease that has, if I remember correctly, 95% mortality for oysters. So it can decimate entire farms. I mean, if there is a bright light or a silver lining, MSX has absolutely no impact on human health. It is, even if an oyster has MSX and it's still alive, that's no harm to humans whatsoever. So we are incredibly concerned, and I've been advised that MSX, which has been in Nova Scotia for decades, so it was first discovered in the Bredor Lakes in 2002, and it has been present in the eastern seaboard of the U.S. for longer than that. So it's not a question of if MSX arrives in Nova Scotia, it is a question of when. And we have seen a couple of instances with some farms on the North Shore that we're working with. But what I would say, when the initial response, before we had any any idea that it was present in Nova Scotia, that our veterinarians in the aquatic team, they took it incredibly seriously. And, the member might not be aware that there are a lot of transfers of seed that come back and forth between PEI and Nova Scotia and between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. It's a small industry where they buy seed from each other. And so that was taken very, very seriously, and controls were put in place to monitor and track any transfers that were going between provinces. A very, very rigorous process. I will also say that there's another disease called dermo that is similar to MSX, only it has a lesser mortality rate for the bivalve, for the animal. But the same is true with respect to the fact that it has no harm. It is no harm to humans. So out of challenges come opportunity. So we know that PEI is likely going to struggle a little bit with oysters. They're our friends, they're our neighbors. We feel badly for them that this is happening to them and their industry. But we can also take comfort knowing that our department has made it a lot easier to grow oysters in this province in the last year. So what we need to do is carry on the path that we've been on of making it easier and creating a climate for positive aquaculture growth in this province, pun intended, with aquaculture growth. And the science that's been relayed to me is that it takes several years for MSX to potentially be fatal for the oyster. And so the faster that we can grow oysters, the better. And I referenced a company out of Antigonish earlier, and a company it's in Miramichi Harbor. They're using different technology for growing their oysters. And I won't do a commercial for them, but I will say that their technology is allowing oysters to grow faster than conventional growing. And what I mean by that is conventional growing is typically a 4 to 5 year grow out. And with the technology that they've invented, they're optimistic that it can be 24 months. Yes. So that is something that I would, if we see that this is proven, that they can grow to market size in a shorter amount of time, I think what you will organically see is other companies taking advantage of this technology. But again, MSX is serious concern for oyster health, no concern for human health. A long time, and it is until we find a cure for it, or a remedy, something that kills the parasite and not the oyster, it is likely something that we will have to manage through. And I'm confident in our team, and I'm confident in our growers that working together we can make sure that the solutions are found and it doesn't impact our market negatively.
I recognize the Honourable MLA for Halifax, Chebucto.
Thank you, Chair. The federal government has taken over the salmon industry in BC and is working to end open net farms in 2025. I'm just curious if this department is working towards a similar goal.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank the member for the question. So the question was, the federal government's taking over and shutting down salmon farms in BC. Do we have intentions of doing the same in Nova Scotia? And I will say absolutely not. And I will say that for two reasons. Number one, remember the theme? So the theme of today's meeting has been largely focused on DFO mismanagement of important species. And so seeing them attempt to manage a valuable piece of our economy in open net pen farms, I wouldn't feel confident that they could manage it properly. And number two, a really, really important nuance to BC's situation is that they have a native species of salmon in BC that is Pacific salmon. And they were attempting to grow Atlantic salmon. So when you couple those two species together, you see that escapes are can be far more damaging. And the worries are a little bit more concerning there. But don't let that overshadow the fact that DFO is not a good manager of many things. In Nova Scotia, we have some of the, if not the best regulations for open net pen farms in the world. We have a very, very thorough process of going through the Aquaculture Review Board. We have a 40-year history of salmon farms in this province. And we have companies that are here that have incredible track records and that are fantastic corporate citizens and that are good neighbors and that have made good investments in Nova Scotia. And that is not to even mention the fact that 2 years ago we had $158 million in open net pen exports, and last year was $128 million. So again, I'll go back to the blueberry capital of the world and $120 million in blueberry exports. $158 million 2 years ago, 128 last year. So it's an important piece of our economy, and I am confident in the regulations that we have in place to make sure that the farms are run properly. They are monitored regularly. Each farm has farm management plans that are scrutinized by the department. I'm confident that the work that the team has done to put the regulations in place is adequate, safe, and making sure that we're contributing to the overall food security of the world. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the Honourable MLA from Halifax, Chebucto.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that answer, Minister. I'm wondering if there has been a review of the applications that have been recently completed for the first tranche of shellfish and seaweed lease sites under the Argyle Aquaculture Development Area, which you mentioned in here. Sure. Has there been a review of the applications that have been recently completed for the first tranche of shellfish? Oh, there's a lot of seaweed lease site under the Argyle Aquaculture Development Area, ADA, and a relocation of the unused site process.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
So the answer is yes on the ADA. I'll focus on the ADA first. I'm getting a little bit of additional information here for the site reallocation part. So as discussed a little bit previously, the Argyle Aquaculture Development Area is a nation leader in aquaculture development, and huge kudos to the municipality of the District of Argyle, because there's a provision, the reason we were able to do it, because there's a provision in the legislation that allows municipal-provincial partnership to get the ball rolling on this. So they recognized the value of aquaculture and started the process 5 years ago. I think it was 5 years ago, more than 4 years ago. So to be able to be the person that got to announce it with Minister LeBlanc in his home community was really, really special. And as I referenced earlier, 53 sites that are going to be up for receiving proposals. We don't have the human capital to receive 53, to open up 53 sites to receive applications. We had capacity to open up the initial 6, so that opened up. They were put online the day that we announced it, and the evaluations took place on the initial call for proposals. And from that, 5 have been awarded, but there's just more work to be done through the application, the official application process. But we're confident that this ADA can save a great deal of time and get people growing much, much faster. With respect to the site reallocation, the first time we did it, we had 2 applications. The first call for site reallocation, which was in December of 2023, had 2 applications, and then we had 2 sites where we didn't receive applications for, and that's a variety of reasons. You know, if it was a site that wasn't successful before it became unused, then perhaps we look at that one differently. Maybe if it's not a suitable place for growing, and then the second round of site reallocation had 1 application for 5 sites. Yeah.
I recognize the Honourable MLA for Halifax, Chebucto.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to the Minister for that question, or that answer. And I just wanted to note that the Minister is very good with dates. He can pull dates out. I am going to pass to my colleague here. Well, we might have to. He's quick on those dates. So my colleague here from Halifax Needham has a few questions that she's going to go from there.
I recognize the Honourable MLA for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will as well say that I'm very impressed, and I'm actually very grateful that the Minister is very open with the conversation and answering the questions. I appreciate that. I just have a few questions, in particular about Bill 24 that was amended in 2021. I'm just curious to know, has the 5-year aquacultural regulatory review under the FCRA taken place yet?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the member for Halifax Needham for the question. The answer is yes. The reg review was completed in March of 2023. That one I didn't have in my head. That's on the screen here in front of me. From that, well, I'll tell you, there was a committee that was put together. From that, there were 17 recommendations that were finalized in March of 2023. I could get all 17 recommendations for you if you want, but I can tell you one of the biggest ones was regulatory right-sizing. So that one was essentially the ability to take shellfish and marine plants and take them out of the Aquaculture Review Board because they're less contentious, right? And we can get growing faster in this province. So that was a recommendation that came from the review, and that is something that I'm happy to say that we completed last year through an amendment to the Fisheries and Coastal Resource Act. Are all of the recommendations there? No. I'll tell you, I can share a little bit more just to give all the information. The department is well underway with implementing other recommendations, and in order to make these changes, we needed to first make changes to the overall legislation. So that's where in the fall we made the changes to the FCRA, the decision maker for shellfish and marine plants coming out of the ARB. Now that these legislative changes are made, the department is diligently working to deliver on the regulations. And the regulations need to go through the appropriate government approvals. We're targeting to implement this summer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the honourable member, MLA for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I asked these questions because I was looking through some things that were mentioned by a number of folks, and it's really important I'm learning so much about this particular department, and I was really curious to know of some of the things that were brought forward by stakeholders. How are we? Where have we been moving? What has been happening? And I will, just say to the minister that since you've been in this role, you've been very open about a number of things, whether there's stuff that we might have had questions on the floor or questions to you directly. So, appreciative of those conversations as well, and which is why I just kind of wanted to, see if there were other things that we hadn't asked that, want to come forward. So the other question that I have for you is, the ARB was asked about multiple times. It was mentioned a number of times. And I'm curious to know how many members are on the ARB right now?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the member for the kind words. And I recently heard a quote that says, when it comes to compliments, I can handle a lot. The ARB. So the nuts and bolts of the answer to your question is that there are currently 7 members on the ARB. The board has the capacity for 10. I can also, and if the member would indulge me to share that, I think we're incredibly fortunate right now with the leadership at the ARB. They are completely independent. Like I've never had a conversation with anyone even remotely touching the board, and that's the way it should be, right? There's no need for ministerial involvement in what their decision-making process is. But I get reports on the internal workings of the board, and I will say that there's been some changes made procedurally that from looking at it from where I sit, it looks like it's a much more efficient and streamlined process without compromising any of the transparency or any of the public engagement or public involvement, all the things that are very important in making these decisions. But A little more clarity has been offered on the timelines for hearings. A little more clarity has been offered on the dates when hearings will be held. Previously, hearings could last for an undetermined amount of time, which is no good for the applicants, no good for community, it's no good for if there are lawyers involved trying to and even by scheduling the dates in advance, it's made life a lot easier. Now, through that, the regulatory review that you talked, the member asked about in the first question, there were the three themes that came back, which was regulatory right-sizing, which we've done by moving, part of it by moving the shellfish and marine plants out of the ARB, transparency and public engagement. So even in the review that took place, we've highlighted, or the report highlighted, the necessity and the requirement for transparency through these processes and for public engagement and involvement through these processes. I'm so happy to hear the member say that she's learning quite a bit through this conversation. I highly recommend that the members take a moment to go through the Fisheries and Aquaculture website. If anyone ever accused us of not being transparent and open, I would tell them that they have never looked at our website, because the amount of information that we put out for public consumption is incredible. You can drill down to every lease area in the province and what they are farming and the size of it. We are just incredibly transparent, and obviously that's the way that we should be, of course. But some of it is in response to previous criticisms. So I think I should probably leave it there. I don't want to say any more.
I recognize the Honourable MLA for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I only have one more question, but before I ask my final question, I want to say that, Minister, you are right. The whole time I've been sitting here, I've been on your website, and I've been going through things as I'm listening to a number of the questions that are being asked, and I'm pointing out all of these pieces because, you know, it's all, for me, transparency, connecting the community, being involved and having these engagement sessions with community is really important for a lot of reasons. But, you know, in particular, when we think about the role that we play as government and the role that we have as stewards of the work that we do, I mean, it's huge. So I want to say absolutely correct. Minister, everybody should be, you know, if they have questions, they can actually access it. And then my final question is, because I'm always concerned about the future and where we are and what we could be doing different or better or the same, is what are we doing to encourage young would-be sea farmers or folks that want to be fishers? What are we doing to encourage them within, you know, your realm of work to pass this on throughout as a legacy?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great question. maybe I only say it's a great question because I have lots of good things to say in response to them. So a couple of items that I noted in my opening remarks, which I know when someone's speaking for 50 minutes, it's hard to hear everything. But we have a student bursary program that we put out in partnership with the Fisheries Sector Council, and I think I said that wrong, but there's an organization that we work with, and they put out bursaries that are between that are either $750 or $1,500. And last year was the biggest year for it, where 399 bursaries, 199. A quantity of bursaries went out between 199 and 399, and it totaled almost $230,000. So that's getting people interested and involved in fisheries. The next wonderful thing that we're doing is we're getting fishing education into elementary schools. So we generated some resources that we've given to elementary schools throughout the province, and we've had, I think it's grade 5 and 6-ish. And we've had great feedback from that. We've had teachers that are using it in their classroom and using it as a tool to educate and support in a different way. Because I don't remember getting fishing education when I was in grade 5 or 6. It was quite a while ago, but I still don't remember it. And then we're also expanding that program, so it's going to be in high schools as well. So providing as much education and information as we can. The other, I knew it was 46. The other interesting thing that isn't necessarily directly related to the department, but it's a really interesting statistic. So we operate the Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board, and on applications, people are required to fill out their name and information and age range. So last year, 46% of approved applications were for people between the ages of 19 and 35. So we're approaching half of these applicants who are younger people, younger than me, maybe not younger than Mr. Chair, but younger than me. So that's incredibly encouraging. And imagine a child that in grade 5 or 6 gets this education in school and then goes on and gets the student through the student bursary program, and then goes on, and because they've learned so much about it, they go and get a loan through the Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board to buy a vessel or buy a license or invest in aquaculture. So that's incredibly heartening to hear. And I would just love to share as well that down in Shelburne at the NSCC, so the department has an office in Shelburne. Actually, it's where most of our aquaculture team lives, in the same building as the NSCC. And that's the NSCC, the School of Fisheries, right? That's where that is located. Last year, they were interested in putting a fishing boat simulator in. And I'm incredibly proud to report that through some advocacy work from Deputy Hollett and some working with other government entities, we were able to help find the support to get this fishing boat simulator installed at NSCC Shelburne. The former Minister of Advanced Education is quite pleased with that as well. But I would say anyone who has the opportunity to get down to Shelburne and would like to try and to basically, it's a really, really educational video game. And I got to do it a few weeks ago. And the operator had actually, it's a gentleman from just outside Sheet Harbor, so I've known him for quite some time. The chart that he pulled up for us to navigate through was Sheet Harbor. So he pulled that, and you're in the simulator, and you can change every condition under the sun, quite literally, and just a great educational tool, and how impactful that can be for someone who's interested in becoming a fishing boat captain or taking a career in navigation, to give them that practical, really neat experience. Yeah. So thank you very much for the question.
Excellent, thank you. We will now turn to the PC caucus, and I recognize the member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
And thank you, Chair. And I must say, I don't think almost at the end of this, I've ever seen a minister have so much energy and enthusiasm. But at the risk of asking our minister to continue, I would like to make a motion to consider the time that we've already had to consider the remaining time as complete 4 hours.
So I'll ask for unanimous consent that the remaining time will be, that this counts towards the 4 hours. So all in favor? Yes. Very good. Now, yeah, absolutely. So I will now ask the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture to enlighten us with some closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I didn't write down or prepare any closing remarks. I thought it best to just be incredibly humble and grateful and thankful for the opportunity to sit here for almost 4 hours and talk about the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. And life is funny where you end up. I would have never, ever, ever guessed that I would have this opportunity to be the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture. And I, at this point, can't imagine working in any other department other than fisheries and aquaculture. And I hope that I've done it justice by giving quality answers to the questions that the opposition and to my colleagues brought forward. If it's not apparent, it should be that I really, really love my job. And as I said, this is the most amazing department to be working with. I'm incredibly fortunate to have a deputy minister who is as dedicated and just such a nice, solid individual that I get to work with, who's become a really, really good friend as well. So thank you to Deputy Hollett for all the work that he does and the leadership that he brings to the team, and to the team, the senior team that I guess they didn't want to be here to hear my opening remarks, but they're here for the closing. So Jordy and Bruce and Carla and Leslie and Kimberly and I'm naming people who I'm not turning around. I know Brennan is back there, and if I turn around, you would see my bald spot on the screen, so we're not going to do that. But I will say a big thank you to the entirety of the team, not just the senior leadership, but we've got an incredible group of people who work at the World Trade Center on the 6th floor. We have an incredible group of people who work down in Shelburne next to the NSCC. We have an incredible team that navigates throughout the province, and the MILOs, the Marine Industry Liaison Officers, are out in a boat, and they're out in a boat. There you go. They're out on the wharves and connecting with industry, and they do incredible work. And again, with the engagement scores, I take a lot of pride knowing that our team is happy to be working in this department. We have some very, very dedicated professionals in our team, and just so fortunate. And it really, really feels like we're moving the needle and making a difference, especially when we look at the aquaculture side of things. The advancements and the number of leases that we've put online in the last year and a half is impressive, and it's not been matched in this province in ever. So we've put so many leases, so many opportunities for economic growth into an industry that is already the #1 economic driver for the province. So I take a lot of pride, a lot of happiness working with the team that we have, and look forward to many more years of working with the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. So thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I will say, be it resolved that a sum not exceeding $15,095,000 be granted to the Lieutenant Governor to defray estimate.
Shall the resolution stand? The resolution is stood. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, everyone. It is now 3:03 p.m. and the House is set to adjourn at 5 p.m. That concludes the subcommittee's consideration of estimates for today. The subcommittee will resume consideration when the House again resolves into a committee of the whole on supply. Please return to your seats in the legislative chamber. The committee of the whole must rise and report before the House concludes its business for the day. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.